Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto forcefully married with his friend's wife. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. She'd been sitting in this bed for an hour now. Idly, she wondered when he would come back. He just went to talk to the doctor, after all. Setting her book aside, she looked out of the window. It was getting dark outside. She felt it was time for lunch. But her musings were stopped when her sensitive ears picked up the coming storm that brewed, or better yet, marched through the hallways. Oh fuck no. Sighing, she braced herself for what could only be the longest evening in her life. Damn being bedridden. The door burst open with a loud bang, startling a man in a white coat that she could see outside. He glared at the offenders who were all too happy with completely ignoring him and rushing into the room. "Auntie!" The chorus of voices assaulted her ears. Four little shits, as she dearly called them, stood at attention around her bed. They were rapid-firing questions at her, none of which she even tried to understand. "Quiet you brats," she shouted. It had the desired effect. For 7 seconds. "How long will you be in here, Auntie? Is it time already? Does it hurt? Where is? I said quiet," she hollered, so loud that the two girls jumped in fright. "I swear your parents suck at bringing up children." She shook her head. "What the hell are all of you doing here?" The blonde girl spoke up, hopping up and down excitedly. "Mommy said we should keep you company until. She scrunched up her face, obviously trying to remember her mother's exact wording. Then her eyes lit up and she smiled. "Until that moron of a moron has gathered his dim wits about him." She smiled proudly. The pink-haired girl nodded excitedly. "Yeah, so we gathered everyone and came here. I can see that, Pinky," the woman laughed. "I swear you're as bad as your mother." The boy with brown hair and the facial markings spoke up. "Tell us a story," he demanded. His black-haired friend nodded. "Yeah, a story." The woman sighed. There was no way to sway these little brats from anything if they ever set their mind upon something. "Fine, what do you brats want to hear?" Oh, I know," the blonde girl exclaimed, bouncing up and down. "Tell us how you met." Her face scrunched up again. Pale blue eyes narrowed in thought. "How you met that moron of a moron." With a snort, the woman sat up a little straighter in bed. "Fine, you better sit down then. It was like, how old are you again, Pinky?" The girl looked deeply offended. "Auntie, I'm 5. The woman waved her hand dismissively. Right. Then it was some 7 years ago. You remember I told you how I was in a coma?" They all nodded. "Well, it was the day I woke up that I met him. Funny thing, I was married to him before I even woke up." The message came, with an Anbu Naruto didn't recognize, early in the morning hours just as he had finished his run. As soon as he had closed the door behind him, the Anbu appeared before him, pushed the scroll into Naruto's hand. It left him dumbfounded for about a minute as he stood there with the nondescript scroll in his hand, staring at the spot the Anbu had occupied for no longer than a second. Eventually he shrugged it off and decided to clean himself up before he even looked at the scroll. Naruto wasn't sure why an Anbu would deliver messages to him in the first place. These special ninja were only ever on the move by orders of the Hokage, and why Tsunade needed to see him now was beyond him. If it was about Jiraiya's inheritance, he didn't need it. If it was about the aftermath of Pain's attack, the seal was tightened again, or that was what he told her. She hadn't spoken a word to him ever since, and she sure as hell had no real reason to do so now. Oh, he was bitter. Bitter about Nagato, about Uchiha motherfucking Madara, about the loss of Jiraiya that still burned him inside. Bitter about everyone worshipping him a hero for 2 days and treating him like a time bomb on the 3rd. He had, after all, single-handedly defeated the man who crushed most of the village with one technique. Now, or so he guessed, they feared him to do the same. It was ironic. He had longed for their recognition. Longed to be more than just the demon brat. He had that now. He now was that monster that they had defeat another monster for them. And it killed him inside that his aspirations were met with such contempt. And something became apparent to him. Something that he had mulled over for a very long time now. Naruto learned that words meant nothing despite their necessity in the world. He learned that no one gave a damn about what he said. They didn't care for his promises, his claims or his tales. They just judged him by action. Action they couldn't even grasp within their feeble minds. Whatever he said wouldn't matter, whatever he promised wouldn't matter if they just saw him bring down a monster. Then he was a monster to them. It was easy. For them. He opened the scroll after his shower and scowled at the short message. He was to report to the Hokage. That was all. Nothing more. Then he reminded himself that words meant nothing. He would judge her by action, not word. Not even written word. Still scowling down at the floor, he got himself dressed. Black pants, black combat boots, tight long-sleeved shirt and a deep blue and a hooded jacket. Just as blue as the shirt. No need to draw any more unwanted attention than he already got. Make no mistake, he still wanted to be acknowledged, but not like this. Not as a monster they throw at other monsters to keep them safe. He didn't want to be respected out of fear. He wanted respect because he was Naruto Uzumaki. But no one seemed willing to give him that. He reached the tower within minutes and entered the office by means that were taught to him by Jiraiya. Through the window. If Tsunade's scowl was any indication, she wasn't the least bit happy that he had picked up on that peculiar habit of his late teacher. "You're late," she snapped at him. Still scowling, she bid him to get the hell into the office and sit lest she'd kick him right back to his apartment. Tsunade said nothing about his change of clothing. Instead, she peered into his eyes as if to discern what to do next, as if she wasn't sure how to proceed. The awkward silence stretched for about a minute before Naruto rolled his eyes. "Geez, Granny. Get this over with already." His voice wasn't as whiny as it usually was when he addressed her in impatience. He sounded genuinely annoyed. "Fine," she said carefully and opened a folder that lay in front of her. "We have a problem." Naruto said nothing, waiting for her to continue. His words wouldn't change anything about it, so he chose not to waste them. "With the village's recent destruction," she continued, "other villages have set their sights on us. Not all of them allies and some far from it. Relations with Iwa had always been brittle, to say the least. We have been severely weakened and we can't let anyone take advantage of that. Not to mention the threat of Madara." Naruto frowned. What did any of that have to do with him? We need a show of strength, of power. We need to show our allies and enemies alike that we are still strong. Tsunade sighed and stood up, turning to look outside over the still vastly ruined village. "And that's where you come in. Your clan, to be precise." "My clan?" Tsunade whirled around faster than any calm person should need to. The question had been too cool, too harsh for Naruto. But it was still him sitting there. But his eyes were hard, fists clenched and his face carefully and unsuccessfully kept of any anger. "Yes," she finally said, nearly choking on the word, "the Uzumaki were. I know who the Uzumaki are, Tsunade. I just don't understand what a dead clan could do for you." She swallowed. What was this aura he had? Then you know that they were widely feared in all of the elemental nations. She didn't bother asking how he even knew about them. She didn't want to know. She had bigger things to worry about. "We need that image to protect Konoha." Naruto scowled, something he did terribly often nowadays. "But they are extinct. My mother was the last of them." Tsunade nodded. A sour expression settled in her face. "Exactly. She was your mother. You are an Uzumaki." Things started to rotate in Naruto's head and the picture it produced was not one he was quite so fond of. If he was the last Uzumaki, that meant that Tsunade wanted him involved in the return of the clan. Now how does a clan return? Children, of course, his children would be Uzumaki by default. They wanted him to restart the clan. "Fuck. No. No," he said instantly. "You won't turn me into a fucking stud horse. I refuse. What the hell is wrong with you to even think that in the first place?" Was she seriously considering this? Tsunade sighed. "Naruto, I wasn't about to have you knock up a whole lot of women." Naruto visibly deflated, the relief washed over him. Thank God Tsunade hadn't lost it yet. "Good," he sighed. "It's just one." Naruto nearly fell out of his chair. "What the hell did I just tell you, Granny? I'm not going to do this." He shouted at her, rising from his chair so fast that it toppled over backwards. The resounding crack of wood on the stone floor echoed like a bell through the office as Tsunade remained stoic. "Naruto." She began with a grave tone, "This is not for you to decide." "What? You are a shinobi. One of my shinobi, to be precise. I am your cage, so you do as I order you." She stood up, her face more serious than Naruto had ever seen it. "Didn't you claim to become Hokage one day? What do you think I am doing here? What does your dumb head spit out about this? What would you do in my situation?" Naruto bit down on his tongue and scowled. He said nothing. Tsunade scoffed. "I thought as much. The village is weak, Naruto. The Uchiha are gone now that Sasuke is officially a missing nin with the stunt he pulled against Killer Bee. Our walls are torn down. Our resources have taken hits so hard I don't even want to think about it. Though we had no casualties thanks to Nagato reviving everyone that died, we are weaker than we were after the Kyuubi's attack. Now tell me, Naruto. What is the Hokage's foremost task? Naruto mumbled something she didn't hear. Speak up, she ordered him. He blanched. To protect the village. Exactly. Tsunade walked around the table and stood in front of him. He noted that he was taller than her. When had that happened? And right now that's what I'm trying to do. The Hyuga are already as strong as their reputation can get. Neither Itachi nor his brat of a brother will return to us. Neither the Yamanaka, the Nara or any other clan for that matter have a reputation strong enough to protect us. The Senju clan can't be revived. Believe it or not, but I am too old to have children. She grimaced. We tried. You weren't the first choice. The Uzumaki are the only name left strong enough to keep us from falling into a war we would most definitely lose. Even with Yamato doing his best to rebuild the village with his wood release. Naruto swallowed and continued to stare at Tsunade's unwavering gaze. Could he do this? Revive his clan? Protect the village from yet another war? Have children, let alone make children with some woman they would push onto him? But it was as Tsunade said. She was Hokage, and the Hokage has to do everything within her power to protect the village. Even if it is ordering the revival of a near-extinct clan. Even if it was him who had to do it. With a sigh he broke eye contact, reached for the toppled-over chair and sat in front of the desk again. He waited. Without a word Tsunade took her seat once more. Good, you seem to understand. I am not doing this because I think it is fun or want to have grandkids before I go down. She allowed a smile at the thought and Naruto blinked. She thought of herself as some kind of parent to him? It made him happy. The thought of a family had always made him happy. He desperately wanted one, after all, for as long as he could remember. Maybe this wasn't too bad after all. Just maybe. Now, Tsunade continued. You were right that your mother was an Uzumaki, but she wasn't the last. The blonde's eyes widened. You mean I have a family out there? A clan member, Naruto, Tsunade explained. The Uzumaki clan was vast. Blood relations in between them are as thin as it got, but that didn't make any of them any less of an Uzumaki. The girl here I am talking about isn't related to you as far as I know in. Naruto's fist impacted with her desk and she jumped a little as the hardwood splintered. You what? His voice was eerily calm. You have another Uzumaki, a member of my clan, of my family, here and you didn't tell me. His eyes had darkened considerably and his chakras stalled the air, dropping the room temperature significantly. Listen, she snapped. I am doing things for a reason, so keep yourself in check or you will just have to meet her and figure out who she is face to face with her. Naruto continued to glare but nodded. She is a prisoner of war. She was part of the invasion and one of the 4 that tried to escort Sasuke out of the Land of Fire. Her name is Tayuya. Tsunade looked up in surprise. You know? Naruto scoffed. I was part of the retrieval squad. You do remember that, do you? She punched me in the face. But as far as I remember, Shikamaru told me that Tamari buried her underneath the forest. Tsunade nodded. She did. It's just, she survived. We picked her up, put her in prison, and while we made a file for her we found out she was an Uzumaki. It wasn't important back then. She was a prisoner, and a cripple. The air grew chilly again. And you didn't think I would at least like to know of her? She was part of the team that helped Orochimaru kill Sarutobi. Naruto's teeth ground together as his jaw clenched shut. Exactly what I thought, Tsunade said. She stood once more and pulled a bottle from underneath her table, taking a generous drink from it. Now let's get this shit over with. He followed Tsunade down into a meeting room. He remembered giving a report here after the attack of pain. At the dimly lit table were 3 figures he didn't think he'd have to see again so soon. Danzo was among them. The other 2 were Hiruzen's old teammates and he didn't bother remembering their names. Homura and Kaharu, as their names were, looked up at him and promptly proceeded to ignore him as they started to talk to Tsunade. Danzo made no move to acknowledge either of them. Tsunade, you sure took your time, Kaharu rasped. Homura nodded. This matter is important, Homura spoke, not looking at her. The sooner this gets out public the better for us. Tsunade's eye narrowed as she sat down. I am sure you meant to say, for the village. She received no answer but she hadn't expected one anyways. Matters have been settled far enough to proceed. She motioned for an anbu. Bring her. Not a minute later the chamber doors were thrown open and a girl in a wheelchair was shoved inside. Naruto had only just turned around to see her when he felt it. Ever since the seal was fixed, and subsequently altered, if not disposed of, by his father, things were different. He could feel things. He could tell when someone was angry or sad. But this girl, she felt something different, something so permanent that it clouded her mind. But he couldn't discern what it was. Her hair was long, impossibly so. Red hair reached down to her ankles, even as she sat there in this wheelchair. Naruto frowned. Her legs looked wrong, as if something was broken within them. He guessed that's what an entire forest does to you if dropped atop of them. She was clad in the standard gray prison uniform, baggy and surprisingly clean. Her skin seemed to be still damp and slightly irritated. They must have scrubbed her down hard to get her clean. His jaw set but he said nothing. Her eyes were a deep violet, if not amethyst. A beautiful color, visible even in the dim light, but they were dull, clouded by the permanent feeling he got of her. The more she was shoved into the light, the more she saw how tired she looked. The bags under her eyes had nearly reached Gaara's level and her stature slouched harder than he had after he found out Jiraiya had died. Was this really someone responsible for the old man's death? Good, Danzo said, speaking up for the first time, we can begin. They shoved her into the space besides Naruto and he thought the urge to growl. Why was she in such a bad shape? He knew that prisoners were usually treated with a bare minimum of respect and all that, but they weren't abused. She was one of the Sound Four, the personal guard of Orochimaru. She had upheld the barrier that prevented anyone from aiding the third Hokage in his fight. She was responsible for his death. But Naruto had grown over the years, even though people wouldn't ever say the same about him. To them, he was just dumb old Naruto, the guy they throw at every threat too big for them to handle. But with all he had been put through, he had grown wiser, grown patient, grown to understand. And he understood. He understood that ninja took orders from their superior and executed them to the best of their ability. But that made nothing easier. Danzo and Tsunade had started discussing something but Naruto didn't listen. He tried to figure out those feeling that was constantly rolling of her. It felt familiar. It's dread, human. Dread and agony. She's in pain. He didn't flinch when the Kyuubi's voice rumbled through his head. How could she be in pain? He asked back instead. Why would I tell you? Naruto had no answer to that. After all, the fox was still pissed that his escape attempt failed. Naruto tuned out the others and looked at Tayuya's dead and clouded eyes instead. They were arguing about him only taking one woman. Inwardly, he scoffed. He hadn't even really taken her yet and the thought of forcefully taking her made him sick. She was a former subordinate of Orochimaru. That meant, aside from the fact that she was most likely from the Sound Village, she was also bearing a curse mark and had endured severe experimentation. If he remembered correctly, she had used a flute and sound-induced genjutsu to fight. Including that, she also summoned monstrosities to fight for her. Naruto knew that the prisoners weren't caused any pain. If she had been tortured for information, it had been a long time ago. Naruto remembered how Sasuke received his curse mark. It caused him unbelievable pain. Was that going on here? Was her curse mark inducing her with so much pain for such a long time that her mind dulled down? The Kyuubi's grumbling laugh resounded in his head. You are far more observant than I ever gave you credit for, human. You are correct. Her curse mark is trying to kill her. He was silent again and Naruto was in no mood to have another scathing conversation with the fox with the anger problem. What did you just? Wincing, Naruto closed of the connection lest his head exploded. He returned his attention to Tayuya. Leaning forward slightly, he couldn't see the curse mark, but there was a patch of skin just above her shoulder that appeared inflamed. Was that it? So he and her will sign the contract. Within 2 years we expect results, Tsunade. Kaharu's raspy voice brought him back to reality as an opened scroll slid in front of him. He blinked and tried to skim through it. It appeared to be a simple contract that stated that he, as clan head of the Uzumaki, would marry Tayuya and take her as his first wife. He frowned at that. They would reside in Konoha and represent the Uzumaki as such. Even their place of residence was written down here. Signed just besides the Uzumaki symbol, Danzo instructed. Naruto looked up to see that he wasn't even looking at him. This was it. Could he enter this marriage for the sake of the village? His stomach turned sideways. Was this his life now? Married to a woman that appeared to be mentally shut down because of her curse mark? Now question was, what would happen if he refused? What would they do then? Force him to do something? Kill the girl off? Breed her? Or even him? He ground his teeth. Whatever he did, marrying her was the better choice for the both of them. The mere thought of her, of anyone, being used in such a way made him unbelievably angry. But could he? Could he live with her? With this girl who helped kill the old man? He shook his head. She had her orders. She did what she was told to do. Just as he always had. But, with gritted teeth he signed with a flourish. The Anbu that had led Yuya into the room slid the scroll over to the girl. As Naruto expected, she didn't respond. Sign it, girl, Danzo snapped, but she didn't even blink. Obviously annoyed, he motioned for the Anbu to do something. The guard stepped forward and pressed the pen into her hand, but she didn't respond and the writing tool dropped from her fingers. Again the Anbu grabbed her hand and moved it. Then Naruto heard her whimper and the feeling she radiated doubled. She was in even more pain than before. Naruto's hand gripped the Anbu's forearm like a vice. Let go, he whispered harshly. The Anbu tried to ignore him and continue with his task, but Naruto's grip tightened considerably. With one hard shove the Anbu was sent backwards a few steps. This girl, she was supposed to be his wife. His family, and he would be damned if he'd let anyone hurt her, even if he couldn't stand her at the moment. Tsunade glanced at him but remained silent. Naruto stood up and gently took her hand, careful not to cause her any more pain than she was already in. He guided her hand to the designated space and leaned over her shoulder. He whispered into her ear. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you want to get out of here, I need you to sign your name here. Her hand twitched and the pen jerked over the paper. It left behind an unreadable mess, but it was enough. The scroll was snatched out from under her hands as soon as the pen left the paper. Good, Homura spoke as he put the scroll away, that makes it official. The wedding will be held in 3 months at the Hokage Tower. Get her presentable by then. With that the elders stood and left the room faster than their age should allow. Tsunade sighed and rubbed her temples. She looked at Naruto, who stared at Yuya with a calculating look in his eyes. She's in pain, he said, has been for a long time. The curse mark is trying to drive her insane, to kill her, but her mind shut down a long time ago. Tsunade nodded. I know, but I can't do anything about it. This seal is beyond me, keeping us from healing her correctly. Naruto frowned. You knew she was in constant agony and basically psychologically out cold and still let them force her into this? She can't even speak. That did not matter to them, Tsunade said sadly. As long as she can have children she might as well be in a coma. How did you even let it come to this? Don't answer, I know that it is necessary, somehow. That doesn't mean I like it though. Naruto sighed and looked over to where Yuya sat. Well, for now I will see about getting her better. I can't leave her like this, no matter what she did. Using the body flicker to get her into his apartment was easy. It also seemed to increase her pain only a little. Naruto had not the faintest idea how he could possibly remove the seal from her neck. He wasn't a seal master, and while Orochimaru wasn't either, he was still better than Naruto, who had begun looked into sealing only a month prior. Frowning as he carefully sat Yuya down on his couch, he tried to recall what exactly the cursed seal did. It took him about 12 minutes of diving through his memories until he stumbled upon one of his more recent ones. He was sitting at the edge of the nature toad oil pond, meditating as requested and trying to gather nature chakra inside his body, though the oil applied to his skin. Naruto could feel it, the influx of it, the expanding of his own chakra within him to accommodate the nature chakra. He tried to lessen the flow but he slipped. He could feel his hand change as the chakra overran his cells, but a sharp slap of a wooden stick snapped him awake. The nature chakra left his body and he exhaled. Ah, shit, he groused, this is not getting any easier. A green toad with a black cloak and a tuft of gray hair complete with an equally gray beard hit him once more with the wooden stick. Don't ya go curzin' round now. It chided and jumped down from the stone statue of a toad he had resided on. Boy, ya gotta get a hang of it. We ain't not doing this like ya snake-faced turd out there. Naruto frowned. What do you mean, Pa? Are you talking about Orochimaru? The elder toad nodded. Sure am, boy. The old snake uses the mean thing of a seal to infuse his pawns with good ol' nature chakra. 'Cause their body ain't trained to handle that, the brats transform, but in a contained way. Can't say it makes M strong as the usual way, but makes M strong anyways. Nature chakra. So the seal infused the body with nature chakra. If that was the case, then he should be able to sense it, control it even. Naruto plopped down in front of Tayuya in a meditative stance on the floor. Within minutes he had gathered enough to allow him through inspection of Tayuya's chakra. And indeed, as soon as Naruto expanded his senses to feel her chakra, he nearly recoiled at the vast amount of it that streamed through her. So much nature chakra would have him be a stone in seconds. So the pain comes from the seal fighting the transformation, there's no other way. The fox suddenly scoffed in his head. You sure put a lot of effort into aiding her. Did she not help kill the third? Did she not lead Sasuke out of the village? Naruto chose to ignore him. It was better this way. He could help her, so he would. She was his family now. It was the right thing to do. Hopefully. Is it? The fox questioned. What will you do if she comes to hate you? Konoha held her a prisoner for years. Do you really think she'd accept you? That is all just wishful thinking. You are desperate for a family. You always were. I can tell that you are happier with this than you would ever admit. But know this. She will leave you, hate you like all the others do. Shut up, he growled back. He didn't need that damn fox to mess with his mind. He set about getting a grasp on the chakra in her systems. It was a bit different from his own, but he should be able to absorb it. He took a deep breath and prepared to take it all in. He needed to absorb hers at the same rate as he expelled it. He took her hands and began pulling the chakra. It sounded easier than it was. The pain was excruciating. The nature chakra that came from the seal was like acid in his veins and burned the tenketsu in his back where he expelled it again. It became nearly impossible to contain the balance in his own system. He could feel his body rapidly degenerating before restoring again. He coughed, the taste of blood filled his mouth, but he didn't let up. He was nearly there. The influx of nature chakra in her body was nearly gone. With a final gasp of effort, it was over. There was an audible crack behind him as the sheer mass of nature chakra broke his table and the wall behind it. She felt sore. Sore all over and beyond what she thought possible. Her mind was a mess of fragmented memories after. Tayuya remembered the fight with the shadow user and how the Suna Nin came and aided him. She lost, and then she was buried beneath hundreds of trees. But she didn't die. Now that she was finally able to think, she remembered that she was dragged out from under the trees, and then there was pain. Nothing more. Her senses returned slowly, crawling into her addled brain after years of disuse. She was exhausted, she was hungry, everything felt numb, but there was no pain. But something was missing. The prying presence in her mind, the whisper in her head, the burning on her neck. It was gone. The curse mark was gone. She had been abandoned. Apparently Orochimaru didn't even bother killing her. It dawned on her that she was a prisoner or even another test subject yet again. If only she could pry her heavy eyes open, she could see. A blonde guy, hacking up blood while holding her hands. Not what she had expected, but better than a dank cell. For now, she tried to look around, only to realize that she couldn't even move her eyes. A curse burned on her tongue, but she couldn't speak. A wave of nausea hit her when she realized just how empty her stomach was. A grunt escaped her lips as she strained her body to move. Even though it had been a quiet noise, it was loud enough to snap the blonde's eyes up to hers. Orange markings around his golden eyes with a strangely rectangular pupil that lay in his eyes like a small black horizontal bar of obsidian. And while it did remind her of Orochimaru, she was not afraid of him. She noticed that he held her hands, and in his hands she could feel it. The chakra of her curse mark. It was in him, he had leached it out of her somehow. That was strange. She had no love for Orochimaru. In fact, she hated the bastard as much as one could. He had experimented on her after kidnapping her from a little village in Iwa. All because she was an Uzumaki. She didn't even remember her mother's face anymore. But she remembered that she would always play on the flute for her before she went to sleep. It had been such a haunting melody, so soft and slow, she hummed it to herself in her cell every night. When she displayed an aptitude for genjutsu, she had focused on sound-based genjutsu and managed to get a flute to use them. She loved to play, it reminded her of her mother. However, even if she hated Orochimaru, being abandoned like that, it still hurt. She was alone again. Well, safe for that blonde guy there who was still bleeding from his mouth. Then he stood up, hands still on hers, and the gold faded from his eyes, being replaced by crystal clear blue. She could only see it for a moment before he stood too tall for her to still see him. Are you feeling better? Fuck no. I'm sore all over, hungry as shit, and I can't even fucking move. But of course her mouth did not work on her. Instead she managed to groan incoherently. He crouched down in front of her and frowned. He placed a hand on her forehead. She tried to move away, but her stiff body failed her completely. You're not running a fever, he mumbled. Good, then let's get you something to eat. Oh, how can I? As if in response, her stomach growled loudly. Her body wasn't even able to produce a blush anymore. There was a puff of smoke somewhere to her left, and out of the corner of her eye she saw a second person stand there. A clone, probably. It left immediately. Suddenly, she was picked up, and the feeling of his arms around her had her mind recoil in disgust and anger, but her body didn't follow through. She was helpless. Fear gripped her heart. What was he going to with her? They were walking, but she could only see him and a part of the ceiling as he cradled her against his chest. Then he laid her down, and she realized that it must be a bed. Her fear tripled, her body went cold as he stood over her. No, 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 no. Don't touch me, she snarled in her mind, doing her damnedest to move, to protect herself. Get the fuck away from me. But he already leaned over, his hands reaching over her body, and she managed to clamp her eyes shut. And then something was placed atop of her. Slowly her eyes opened, even though Shish had intended to snap them open. A blanket covered her up to the chin. The blonde was nowhere where she could see him. Fatigue hit her as a crushing wave, the warmth of the blanket pleasantly suffocating the cold in her body, and her grip on consciousness faded. Naruto closed the door when he saw her eyes close and her face relax. With a sigh, he slid down to the floor, leaning against the closed door. What the hell was he doing? He had nearly killed himself for her, and they hadn't even exchanged 2 words yet. He shook his head. Stupid hero complex. It's the red hair, I tell you. Naruto's eye twitched, but he decided to ignore the fox for now. As if her red hair, her beautiful, wonderful, soft red hair. Okay, maybe it had something to do with that. Red was a beautiful color after all. But nothing beat orange, aside from her hair. His eye twitched once more. Shut up, he shouted at his feet. With a sigh, he stood up. If she was going to live here now, she would need some clothing. No way he'd let his family wear a prison jumpsuit. You do realize that you once wore the same in orange, right? I hate you so much. You mean Uncle Kurama was teasing him? She snorted. The fuzzball did nothing but tease him. I do have to thank him for that later. Tayuya woke when someone opened the window at her side. She was still tired and sore, but she felt by far better than yesterday, good even. She cracked her eyes open only the tiniest bit and saw the blonde guy hang out a blanket. He then turned to something that stood at her bedside just outside of her field of vision. When a cold feeling invaded her veins in her arm, her head jerked to the side and she saw that she was connected to an IV. The blonde didn't notice her movement and turned away. How long will she need these infusions? He asked someone she couldn't see. A woman answered. Until she has absorbed enough nutrients to rebuild herself. I still can't believe you took the seal of her. Anko will come hounding you for that when she returns. Quote. He laughed tiredly. I expected as much. Has Shizune found some suitable clothing? Tayuya could hear the smirk in the woman's voice. You beat down pain on your own but are afraid of buying undergarments for a woman? Shut up, Granny. The woman laughed. Anyways, with the cursed seal gone, she'll recover quickly. Her legs are as good as new as well. Her throat should be fine by tomorrow, maybe even tonight already. She is an Uzumaki after all. Thank you, Granny. Naruto. I swear if you don't stop calling me that, I'll use my position as Hokage to put you on D ranks for the rest of your life. Maybe even worse. There was no laugh in the blonde's voice when he responded. Worse than this? You had me marry a stranger for the sake of the village. He gestured to her and she nearly stopped breathing. You had me marry her, a girl that aided killing the old man. How much worse could it get? Married? What the actual flying fuck? Tayuya refused to be talked about as if she wasn't there and forced her body to move, to make them notice her. They wouldn't kill her. They had already gone great lengths to ensure that she recovered. Naruto noticed the ruffling of sheets behind him and was at her side immediately. The woman walked into her field of vision and she stared. Was that Tsunade? You can't speak, I suppose? the blonde asked. Tayuya growled in annoyance. Figured as much. Then let me explain what happened. Or better yet, he turned to Tsunade. I let her explain, because we are in this mess because of her anyways. Tsunade grumbled something under her breath but came and took Naruto's place at her side. So, how am I going to explain this? Okay, you are aware that you were taken into custody, yes? Just blink twice for yes and once for no. Tayuya rolled her eyes but blinked twice. Tsunade nodded. That has been some 5 years ago. While you were in prison, the cursed seal on your neck tried to drive you insane, kill you off, but before that happened your mind shut down, putting you in a coma and effectively halting the seal in its attempt to kill you. And since Naruto here somehow took the seal off you, your mind returned. But, your body is in a bad state. Tayuya rolled her eyes. You don't say, bitch. You don't fucking say. Because you barely moved, your muscles atrophied severely. Your vocal cords are brittle from disuse and you are malnourished all over because they couldn't get you to eat, Tsunade continued. She sighed and glanced at Naruto, who was currently outside of Tayuya's field of vision. While you were incarcerated, our village was attacked and nearly destroyed entirely. In the wake of our weakness, we are faced with the threat of war. To stop that from happening, we needed to show power. That power being, the Uzumaki. I don't like where this is going. Did they say I'm married? Oh fuck. Tayuya's mind was reeling. Did they plan on breeding her? Shit, she couldn't even bite her own tongue. Had they already impregnated her? These bastards. Tsunade knew not of Tayuya's inner panic attack so continued to speak. You have been released from your incarceration yesterday and were formally married to the last male Uzumaki. In an official ceremony a few months from now you will be required to display the return of the Uzumaki clan to Konoha. Tsunade sighed and stepped back. She glared at Naruto. Happy? The blonde scoffed. Happy? Far from it. And neither is she. Can't you see it in her eyes? She must think you already had her raped or something. For which I will murder you if that is true, by the way. Choice or not, she is an Uzumaki, a part of my family. And even if she is my wife only on paper I will do whatever it takes to keep my family safe. He glanced at Tayuya who was looking intensely at him. He met her gaze evenly, not looking away. There was no real warmth in his eyes but they weren't outright cold. Still, Tayuya's mind had enough for the day and shut down. As her eyes rolled into the back of her head he sighed. This was going to take a long, long time. The next week was straining. For both Naruto and Tayuya. Tayuya struggled to regain her body's functionality. It was by far harder than she had even imagined it, even if it went even faster than Tsunade had predicted. Naruto on the other hand was struggling with himself. He didn't know if he should kill her or try his best to help her. Her regained ability to talk, read curse, made it even harder. She refused his help with every breath she took. Leave me fucking alone already. She shouted at him, throwing a pillow after him. He closed the door before it even hit. That was the sum of how it went for 4 days now. As soon as she could open her mouth again, she cursed him, the village and every other human being that had her brought in this situation. On the last part, Naruto felt like agreeing. Family, huh? He mumbled to himself and went out to work, get some missions done. To support both of them, he needed more money and curiously enough, his mother's savings were nowhere to be found. The elders were going to pay, Naruto decided, one way or another. He decided to stay out of her sight then, help her recover first and everything else later. Hopefully before the ceremony. Her breakfast was in her room when she woke up, her clothes laid out for her and nowhere was a sign of Naruto. Tayuya eyed the cup of instant ramen warily and with much distaste but she ate it anyways. She was surprised to see her clothes laid out for her and one of his hoodies. A deep blue one. Shrugging, she only put on the hoodie, it was far too big anyways, and tried to stand up. Of course, she failed. Her legs were too damn weak. And so were her arms, too weak to hold her on the handlebar, she couldn't even do physical therapy. Her life was a goddamn mess, a considerably less painful mess than before, but not better to her in the slightest. She was trapped with this blonde bastard in a village that held her captive for 4 damn years, none of which she could even remember. Tayuya snarled as she pushed herself forcefully onto her feet. They gave in an instant. She crumpled onto the floor in a heap and made no move to get up. She just lay there, and cried. It was one of the hardest things I ever did, learning to walk again. The black-haired boy nodded. Dad said that there is barely anything more taxing. Not even losing his arm was as hard on him. The woman nodded. Yeah, I remember that, but I will come to that later anyways. Besides, your father does know that we can regrow his damn arm, right? What? She ignored the chorus and continued her story. Anyways, it wasn't getting easier. It seemed to her that the blonde one had just abandoned her as well. She hadn't even seen him the past week. All she did was trying desperately to walk, eat and then fall asleep, either on the bed or on the floor. Crying and cursing in both cases. Fuck, she screamed at the top of her lungs as her legs gave away once more and she fell. Why? She screamed at the carpet, why is this happening to me? Tears streamed down her cheeks as she tried to crawl back to the bed but she wasn't strong enough. Her body failed her and she cried quietly there on the floor. But then, the door opened. Tayuya didn't move, pretending to be passed out. She was lifted from the hard ground far more gently than she had expected and placed in the bed again. The blankets were pulled over her and the steps began to retreat again. Before the door shut however, she heard a quiet, "I'm sorry." The day after, it was Naruto who woke her. He told her that he would need to leave the village for a day or two for a mission. She steadfastly ignored him, even as he placed the meal in front of her. She was surprised to see that it wasn't instant ramen. Tayuya looked up to him and saw that his eyes were bloodshot. He looked paler than she remembered and he had dark rings under his eyes. She fought down a biting remark and said nothing. He left without a word. Tayuya was surprised when not Naruto, but some brown-haired girl opened her room's door the next morning. "What happened to shithead?" she asked, ignoring the woman's introduction and greeting. She scowled. "He left for a mission yesterday evening." Tayuya dimly remembered him saying something like that. The redhead snorted. "The bastards goes ahead and marries me and then has the gall to just fucking up and leave me here." It was sarcasm to some degree but Shizune, as the woman introduced herself, did not seem to think it funny. Her scowl deepened. "It's not like he has a choice. Your treatment is expensive and since they forced the clan onto him he has to fund everything himself." The smirk slipped from Tayuya's face. "He takes 12 missions a day. 12, and all the money goes into your medication. I doubt he even eats anymore." Tayuya snarled at the woman. "I didn't ask for this." She shouted at the woman. "I didn't ask him to do this. I didn't ask any of you fuckers to heal me." "Oh, we wouldn't. We wouldn't give a damn. As it is, the elders don't need you fully functioning. The fact that you can bear children is all that counts but Naruto insists upon the fact that you are his family while you damn well don't act like it." With an annoyed shout the woman slammed the tablet down on the small desk besides the bed and stormed out of the room. Tayuya didn't eat that day. She just remained in bed and stared out of the window. Naruto returned 2 days later. He was tired, beaten up but successful. Stupid A-rank missions. Why did these always turn S-rank on him? When he pushed into his apartment he was prepared to simply fall onto the couch and sleep. Only that it was occupied. Tayuya was asleep on the couch. On the table in front of it were 2 meals. Honestly, they didn't appear edible. He wondered how she made it into the kitchen anyways. He knew her legs didn't work, so she probably crawled around all day, if the front of her white shirt was any indication. Why didn't she use the wheelchair? He sat down and watched her sleep with a thoughtful expression. Maybe she was actually willing to accept her situation. After all, she had apparently made food for him. And that warmed his heart far more than it should have. With a short sigh he downed the contents of the plate farthest away from her sleeping form, guessing it was intended for him. He smiled, despite the fact that it tasted terrible. Too much salt. He remained sitting on the floor besides the couch and watched her sleep. Eventually he too fell asleep to the sound of her rhythmic breathing. The loud squeal from the blonde girl startled her. "Oh, that's so sweet. Geez, kid," she snapped, "you're as bad as your mother." The girl looked positively ashamed and backed down again. "So what did he do?" the pink-haired girl asked. "You brats would know already if you'd stop interrupting me." A strange feeling against his cheek woke him the next morning. It was warm and soft as it drifted over his whisker marks. His left eye opened a tad to see Tayuya, studying his face with a thoughtful expression. She didn't even notice him being awake. Not until he slowly grasped her hand and moved it away as he sat up, bright red in the face. It took a second before Tayuya even fully realized that he had just sat up and she drew her hand back so fast she hit herself in the chest. Her ears turned scarlet and melded into her hair but her expression was defiant, as if daring him to say anything. Naruto swallowed and stood up. He picked up his empty plate. Tayuya's eyes widened as she saw it. It was awful, he said as he walked towards the kitchen. He halted in the doorway. But, thank you. A smile he couldn't see hushed over Tayuya's lips before she scowled fiercely. Fuck you, she shouted after him. He laughed aloud, for the first time in what felt like ages. You want to do what? Naruto asked again, for the third time. Tayuya rolled her eyes. I want to sell my information on Orochimaru to the village. Are you really too dumb to listen? Naruto scowled as he helped her settle down on a chair in the kitchen. I just don't see why you want to do this. If you declare that you even have information, they'll drag you back to tea and I faster than I can react. And then Danzo will try to get his hands on you. Shoving his arms away from her person, she scowled and looked away. Money is money, right? Could always use it. Naruto walked around the kitchen table and sat down opposite of her. There is no need for you to get your mind messed with. Money is no problem. It damn well is. Tayuya snapped back. I won't have you work yourself into the ground for my crippled ass, you maggot. Indeed, Tayuya was not happy being weak. Her being cared for, it made it only all the more obvious to her. She needed to do something, anything to help herself. Being helpless was not something she liked to be. Being helpless had hurt her before. Naruto sat back in his chair and sighed. Technically, you are my wife, so caring for you is only natural, he said with a shrug. He didn't know if he really meant that, but it was nice coming home to someone, not an empty and cold apartment. Even if the one he came home to was cursing worse than any sailor out there. Still, Tayuya scowled. Fuck you. There was no real bite in it. Then her eyes leapt up to his. But that also make you my husband, doesn't it? She exclaimed, somewhat triumphantly. So I have to care for you as well. So let me fucking do this. Naruto blinked, and blinked once more for good measure. Then he blushed. Tayuya reflected his expression to AT as she realized what she had just said. She tried to turn away, hands pushing against the table, but her legs were too weak to turn herself, so she just ended up pushing the table into a stunned Naruto, who promptly fell over, chair included, followed after by his bowl of ramen. The moment was broken and Tayuya started laughing. Tears came to her eyes as she damn near fell of the chair herself. Naruto pushed himself up, the bowl along with its contents atop his head and a frown on his face as a noodle clung to the bridge of his nose. He scowled at her, the noodle slipping completely of his nose before he, too, broke down laughing. Still laughing, he pulled himself up and pushed the table back to where it belonged. Tayuya was wheezing, her laughter ringing loud and clear through the kitchen. She hadn't laughed so hard in ages, a decade even. Eventually, she laid down against the tabletop, breathing hard, the occasional laugh still escaping her. She wheezed, you're trying to kill me, damn it. I'll have you know that I did my damnedest to achieve the opposite. Naruto huffed, bending down to clean up the remains of his meal. Another laughed gasp escaped her. Stop, damn it, I can't. Breath. Naruto scowled a little. How is that funny? You're such a shithead. She laughed, clutching her sides. Rolling his eyes, he chucked the bowl in the sink. Yeah. Still, I can't just throw you at them and expect them to not drive you insane for every bit of information you have. Orochimaru hurt this village big time. They'll go far to get him. So? Tayuya growled. You're allowed to go out and risk your ass, but I am not? Naruto halted before he even began. He wasn't one to deny others the right to fight. It had been done to him far too often. My ass isn't as nice as yours, and besides, I'm doing just fine out there, he huffed indignantly. His lame attempt at dissuading her only serving to have him blush madly. Tayuya's left eye twitched, but she ignored it. So let me do this, idiot. I won't let you work for me like I'm some cripple. Even though she was at the moment, the feeling just made her sick. Naruto took a deep breath and sat down again. Having her sell information on Orochimaru no less, would bring a whole lot of money. More than a few S-ranked missions. But the Yamanaka clan took enormous casualties both times Orochimaru messed with the village. He kidnapped many children and experimented on them when he was still in Konoha, and made sure to kidnap even more when he invaded Konoha during the Chunin exam. Inoichi may be impartial to most prisoners, but to a former personal guard of Orochimaru? The man had lost a brother and 2 sisters to the snake. There was just no way he wouldn't mess Tayuya's mind up. And Naruto would be damned before he let his family be driven insane by some man on a vengeance frenzy. The fact that he tried to hate Tayuya for the sake of his own vengeance escaped the blonde hypocrite. "Fine," he said, "but it won't let you go alone. The Yamanaka have one of the worst grudges against Orochimaru and I won't have him tear your mind apart." Tayuya snorted in distaste. She didn't need a bloody bodyguard. As if anyone could tear her mind further apart than it already was. But she nodded slowly. She had been quite wrong. And for the first time since she woke up, she was truly glad that Naruto had been there. When she was wheeled into the T&I building, the first thing that happened was the Anbu that informed Naruto of a meeting he had to attend. Before Tayuya could even panic about being left alone here, Naruto shot him down. "The Uzumaki clan has business to attend. The meeting can wait," he said and ignored the ninja as he continued to wheel Tayuya into the prepared room. Inside was no other than the clan head Inoichi Yamanaka himself. Curious, Naruto asked innocently, "Was there not a clan meeting for us to attend? Is there anything specific you needed, Lord Yamanaka?" Tayuya stiffened. This man was the clan head. Why would he be the one to search her mind? The man shrugged. "I am here to make sure that everything is done to the best of our abilities. The information she offers to sell is, after all, quite valuable." Naruto did not appear convinced by that but placed Tayuya's wheelchair into the ceiling circle. Before entering it though, he studied it for a moment before nodding to himself. Inoichi stepped in front of Tayuya, face carefully blank, and extended a hand towards her head. She closed her eyes and hoped for it to be over soon. But nothing followed. When she opened her eyes, Inoichi's hand was but a hair's breadth from touching her forehead. Naruto had tightly grasped the man's wrist. "I trust you will only see what you need to see," he said, eyeing the man suspiciously. The Yamanaka's eye twitched but his mask held. "Of course," he grit out. Tayuya wasn't prepared for what happened next. Suddenly his hand felt like it sank into her head, pushing her back inside her own body before her vision swam and she saw her memories from the outside. "The Taki base is compromised, we move further down south. Now go, children, kukukuku. The Uchiha is important because I say he is important. You dare question me? My, what a bad girl, Tayuya. Kabuto, take her away. Kukukukuku. A new concoction is ready. The invasion is going as planned. Move to create the barrier as soon as Lord Orochimaru gives the signal." What? Why was he viewing this? This had nothing to do with their bases. "You're to leave the area immediately. The troops are on their way to the clans to do some damage." Is that so? Tayuya froze within the confines of her own mind. That was the Yamanaka's voice. "Indeed, little girl, you will show me what I want to see. I care little for the bases. I want the names and faces of those who killed my siblings." The memories flickered and an image appeared she had nearly forgotten. It was her mother's face, but she was dead. Suppressed memories. Aren't they full of surprises? You will show me the names. There was pressure all around her, as if her memories were piling upon her. The heavy weight squeezing the air out of her lungs as images she didn't want to remember were shot into her. She was tied to a wall. The cursed seal had malfunctioned and nearly burned her shoulder off. Orochimaru walked up to her. Not a word was spoken as he rammed a spike of sorts through her shoulder and poured his chakra into her. She screamed in agony. The mission had been a failure. Kidomaru had lost an arm and was bleeding out fast. She didn't need to be tortured again for losing a teammate, so she and the others hurried inside of the base. Orochimaru wasn't there. It was Kabuto who greeted them. "You failed," was all he said before the poison darts hit them. It burned her blood until she lost consciousness. There was fire everywhere, red flames licking at the stairs down. She couldn't run away, the way was blocked. Arms pulled her back into a warm embrace. Her mother hummed into her ear and said, "All will be all right, baby girl. And tomorrow we will get you your own flute, okay?" Just as she tired around to smile at her mother despite the fear, the fire and the smoke, she saw the snake tear her mother's throat apart. She fell backwards into her room. Blood gurgled from her throat as the man with the yellow eyes stepped over the corpse like she was a lump of rags. He sneered, "There you are, little Uzumaki. Come with me. Kukukuku." She was flung into a room. The seal didn't even stop burning yet. The pain was too much, everything was too much. Mother hadn't wanted this. She wanted her mother. She wanted her back. The door opened and Orochimaru stepped inside. There was a syringe in his hand as he smiled evilly down at her writhing form. He opened his mouth and It stopped, the images vanished and she could breathe again. Her eyes stung with tears and she blinked to clear her vision so she could get away. Before her stood Naruto, his back towards her. His chakra was all around her, filling out the room as he stood between her and Inoichi. "You are finished," he snapped. The pressure he applied to the Yamanaka's arm had the man wince in pain as he nodded stiffly. He turned to Tayuya with golden eyes, the orange marking around them. Unsteadily she met his gaze and he nodded. He pushed her out of the room and halted in the doorway. "Do that again and you will never have the chance to try it on anyone else ever again." Naruto never mentioned that he had seen the memories as well. He grit his teeth. He felt like he was going bipolar just because of her. Grandpa did that. The blonde girl looked downright awful at the thought. The woman grimaced and reached over to pat her head. "Don't worry too much. He was an asshole at the time but he redeemed himself. Now just be quiet already." The money earned was enormous. It seemed that Inoichi had added a sizable sum to keep their mouths shut. Naruto didn't like it, and even less so did Tayuya, so they formed a formal complaint. With Tayuya's words, Naruto was sure that neither Tsunade nor Inoichi had ever seen so many foul words written on one piece of paper. Of course, they kept the money. Naruto had at first wanted to return it but Tayuya saw no reason to give the guy that tried to mind rape her even a single coin back. After that fiasco, Tayuya seemed to forego her outright hate for Naruto. She didn't really trust him, but things got better. Naruto on the other hand, he wasn't sure if he could keep disliking her. The past was in the past, and even though he tried blaming her for his misery, it didn't work in the slightest. It was 3 days after the interrogation when Teiwa woke up from another nightmare. They frequented her, haunted her every night. She cursed that Yamanaka for pulling these memories up from the depth she had banished them to. She rubbed her bloodshot eyes and prepared herself to once again battle the threshold of the door of her room with her wheelchair. But it never happened. When she pushed herself as hard as possible through the door, she didn't meet any resistance of the protruding wooden threshold. Instead she slid right over a flat surface and into the couch. With a soft, umph, she flopped over the armrest. "God damn it," she sighed. Lifting her head she found her face in Naruto's lap. The blonde's eyes were wide open, mouth hanging and moving in silent curses as his hands cupped his family jewels. Realizing that her forehead must have smashed his bits to bits, she snorted a laugh and pushed herself back of the couch into the wheelchair. With a groan Naruto rolled of the couch and hit the carpet. He rolled onto his back and glared mildly at Tayuya. "This," he groaned, "this is not how I imagined being woken by my wife for the first time." Tayuya wheeled herself closer to him and kicked his leg. It wasn't more than a weak poke, Shish wasn't capable of more, but it was the gesture that counted. "Shut up you wimp. Be glad I didn't outright castrate you." She glanced back to the door she had shot trough. The wooden threshold appeared to have been sanded down. "You fixed the door?" "Of course," Naruto said as he pushed himself onto the couch again, sitting in an awkward position as to lessen his pain. "You should at least be able to move freely here until you can walk again." Tayuya nodded. "Thanks," she whispered, and, "Sorry." Naruto blinked in surprise. He didn't remember her thanking him ever before. "Don't mention it. You are my wife after all," he added with a grin. "Huh, you and your busted nuts aren't much for a husband. I'll have you know that they work perfectly fine." Tayuya faked gagging. "I didn't fucking want to know that." Danzo Shimura had been a patient man. He knew when to wait and when to act. If it was necessary for the village to prosper, Danzo would do it and nothing could ever deter him from his path. Not even the village's resident Jinchuriki. But Danzo had made a mistake. Patience may have been a virtue but his had held long enough now. He had let Tsunade set up the revival of the Uzumaki clan. He scoffed internally at it. How could the clan be revived by just one woman? And one so foul at that? Still, she was an Uzumaki as well, it was imperial for her to carry children. And it had to happen fast. But from what his agents told him, the relationship between husband and wife was strained and would not bear children in the foreseeable future. This woman would change the Jinchuriki. That could not be allowed. Measures had to be taken. Tayuya awoke with a strangled gasp, cold sweat on every inch of her shaking body as she cursed violently. Another nightmare. The 7th in a row. Sighing, she fell back into the, by now, damp pillow. She didn't have enough strength left to be disgusted anymore. She was tired, so eternally tired. but sleep refused to come to her without those rotten nightmares. Tayuya swallowed and noticed how raw her throat felt. Cursing under her breath, she sat up. Outside the sun was already rising again. She hadn't slept a wink yet. Shaking her head, she decided that she needed something to drink for her parched throat. Still, it came as a surprise when she saw the glass of cool water rest at her bedside. Tayuya frowned. She didn't remember it being there when she went to bed yesterday. She didn't remember it being there when she woke up the last time, which was barely an hour ago. The door opening startled her. She had focused solely on the glass. Naruto walked inside, seemingly set on not acknowledging her awakened state. In his hands was a steaming kettle and a cup. He set it down on her nightstand and took the glass. Standing there at her bedside, he seemed conflicted about something, his brow knitted tightly together. Finally his eyes met hers. "It's herbal tea," he said carefully, "helps with the nightmares." He didn't wait for any kind of response before turning around on the spot, fully intending to leave the room as soon as possible. But his sleeve was caught and his arm jerked back. He froze in place. Tayuya's voice was hoarse, the words like nails in her throat. Why are you doing this?" Naruto didn't move. He swallowed audibly and stepped back a little so her hold on his sleeve was no longer pulling him back. He opened his mouth, but no words came forth. He tried again but nothing. Shaking his head, he downed the glass of water in his hand in one go and spun around so fast that Tayuya nearly jumped in surprise. His expression was uncertain, confused. "I don't know," he said weakly. "I'm telling myself that I simply did as I was ordered, that I just managed to prevent you from being thrown into a breeding program. That I did what I had to." He carefully sat down on the bedside, looking out of the window. "You know, I am really trying to hate you. Trying really hard." He looked at her, smiling weakly. "But I can't. I try to hold you responsible for the old man's death, for Sasuke's betrayal, but I can't. You are just like me, caught up in this grand scheme of bullshit. Things that are beyond us laid our paths. Some bastards toyed with us, lied to us, and now we are here. Married for fuck's sake." Tayuya gave his arm a light push. He looked at her questioningly. Her smile was even weaker than his. You don't." She grimaced. She had never been one for many words. Shaking her head, she gazed into his eyes, something aggressive settling in. "Fuck, I'm not good at this." Before Naruto could tell her that it was okay, she pulled him into a bone-breaking hug. He winced, throughout confused and surprised. But he didn't move. "I'm not going to say I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I would understand if you'd fucking hate me. I did a lot of shit in my life, never because I enjoyed it. I did what I had to survive. Maybe I'd not do all of that fucking shit again. I'm not proud of it, but..." She pulled back a little and looked into his tired eyes. "But I'm not ashamed either. So hate me if you must, I won't fault you, shithead." His head fell forwards with a tired sigh, leaning against her forehead. "I told you, Tayuya," he whispered, meeting her eyes again, "I can't hate you for that." "Then what else will you do?" she asked quietly. His smile was a little stronger than before. "You are my wife, you know? Maybe I could try loving you instead." She expected the squeals this time and had enough time to cover her ears. The brown-haired boy wasn't as lucky. His rapt attention was broken and he fell at the bedside with a yelp. She grinned down at him. "We both knew that was gonna happen." The boy just scoffed, an incredibly adorable action for a 4-year-old. "Now," she said to all of them, "if you want to hear what happened when we woke up you better be quiet." She woke up to comforting warmth around her. No nightmare woke her. No one entered her room to drag her off to training or another experiment. She wasn't woken by her instincts, she didn't feel endangered. She felt safe, a feeling she hadn't had in over a decade. And exactly that set her on edge. She wasn't safe. She never was. Safe wasn't right. Safe was something she didn't get to feel. But sleep clung heavily to her, the warmth pleasantly suffocating her fears. Still, she pried her eyes open and came to face the wall. That in itself was already strange. Never would she allow herself to sleep without securing the entrance to her sleeping place. Then she noticed the strangest thing that had happened to her yet. There was a pair of arms wrapped around her waist. Tayuya wasn't dumb. She was a shinobi after all, and even if she was cuddly warm, completely confused and just about to fall asleep again, she knew whose arms were wrapped around her. So the only question left to answer was, why? That was not as easily answered. She didn't remember falling asleep like that. Or did she? The warmth made her head fuzzy. Why was this so comfortable? Didn't that guy hate her or something? Stupid bipolar fuck. Tayuya squirmed a little and tried to turn around. She managed to lay on her back but his arms still had her trapped. Tilting her head sideways she looked at his face. Naruto looked surprisingly peaceful when asleep. It had been the same when he had fallen asleep on the coffee table. There was no frown, no stress visible. He didn't look as haggard as he had before. Maybe this was his first fully slept through night, just like hers, in a long time. She couldn't find herself to get angry. Not after what he had told her last night. He said he would, kid, try to love her. It made her smile, even now. A stupid smile, so wide it hurt her face, not used to the motion. How could he say that? How could he just decide to not hate her, even love her? Tayuya owed him a lot. She didn't want to imagine what would have happened to her if that Danzo guy would have gotten his hands on her. She blinked when he nuzzled his face into her hair. Maybe having it cut wasn't necessary after all. She shook her head mentally. Could he even do that? Was that even allowed? To just try and love her? Hell, could she even do the same? Now, aside from the fact that his admittedly handsome face was not an inch from hers, he wasn't that bad of a guy. He was compassionate, honest, hard-working and so, caring. Caring for her, whom he hadn't even known, who had just been pushed onto him. He had helped her without expecting anything. He was patient beyond what she had ever imagined possible. He was a good cook, he was funny. No one had ever made her laugh so hard before, or made her laugh in general. He protected her, and even though it bugged her that there was the need to do that at all, it was a wonderful feeling. Her husband was an amazing guy. In retrospect, aside from her being a cripple, this was the best thing to ever happen to her. She smiled, she just couldn't help it. It wasn't like her to feel that giddy. Looking over his short blonde hair, she spotted the tea kettle on her nightstand. She dimly remembered him placing it there when she cried, into his shoulder. Embarrassment washed over her and her ears burned as red as her hair. What was wrong with her? Since when did she cry, let alone in the presence of another? She had cried because she felt alone, cried because she felt hopeless, hurt and wounded. She felt weak, but he assured her he'd help her be strong. She felt alone and he told her he'd be there. There was pain and he promised to stand through to with her. What was wrong with this guy? Her heart fluttered uncontrollably when she thought about it. Never had anyone ever been so nice to her. So good. The concept in itself felt foreign. On what grounds could he make these promises? She couldn't think of a single reason why he wouldn't just get rid of her. Of course Naruto had been awake from the moment she stirred in his arms. How she even ended up there? In essence, she passed out crying against him, clinging to his shirt. He just couldn't leave her then, not when she truly needed him. Not that he could have left if he wanted to. Her grip on his shirt was vice-like. She squirmed in his arms and turned onto her back. He tried his hardest to remain undetected, yet he awaited the punch or shove to come. But she didn't. He could feel her breath against his lips and her eyes on him. Why wasn't she pushing him away? Then her hand came to rest on his cheek and he couldn't help but open his eyes. Violet eyes stared back at him, her expression bordering serene as her hand drifted slowly up his temple and into his hair. She had no sneer on her lips, no frown marred her face, no pain in her features. She was beautiful, gorgeous. How had he missed that before? Her lips parted slightly. Your hair, she whispered, it's changing color. Is it? He found himself asking, just as breathless as she had. Her nod was small as her fingers scraped along his scalp. It's getting darker. Is orange by now, she murmured as he tired not to give in to her touch. It sent tingles down his spine all the way to his toes. He decided he had to ask. Ask the question she must have had as well. What are we going to do? A smile tugged on her lips. I have no fucking clue. He smiled as well. Yeah, neither have I fucking sucks. Her smile widened as he cursed. I'm already rubbing off on you. His shrug was small, not to disturb their position. Could be a clan thing. Tayuya laughed. You better fucking bet it is. So, he began. What are we going to do about this? He could see her ears redden. Fuck off? She asked uncertainly. It was so very much unlike her, it was downright unsettling. Naruto frowned and pulled back. Her hand stayed at his cheek until he was out of reach, dropping away painfully slow. Her eyes were glued to his until she blinked a few times and looked at her hand. She blushed. Breakfast?" he suggested. She just nodded and pulled her hand back, hugging it to her chest and turning to the wall again. Naruto stared at her back. He wasn't sure what to think, what he was allowed to think. He walked out of the door when he heard a quiet, "Thank you," and knew it was okay. "Is that why you are here now, Auntie? Because you slept with him?" Her eyebrows rose high. "Kid, you are 4, right? What did your dumb ass of a father tell you about that?" The little Inuzuka shrugged. "I asked how Akamaru got all these little pups and Daddy told me that if someone loves his mate and they sleep together, little pups come out." She sighed. "Yes and no, kid. You have to ask your mother about it. Not your stupid father. Anyways, the summon from Tsunade was not any more personal than the last one. So Naruto decided to appear through the window as he had before. Damn it, I told you to use the damn door, Naruto." Ignoring the Hokage for the moment, Naruto strode over to the lone chair and sat down. Crossing his legs he asked, "So? What is it?" Tsunade was about to speak when she took in his appearance. "What happened to your hair?" she asked. He shrugged. "Tayuya thinks it's my Uzumaki blood. Closer proximity to another Uzumaki triggers it. Or something like that." "Closer proximity?" Naruto shrugged again, though Tsunade could see the tips of his ears redden. Shaking her head, Tsunade motioned to the Anbu at the door. It swung open a few seconds later and a girl stepped in. Naruto didn't need an introduction to see that she was an Uzumaki. Shoulder-length red hair and violet eyes. She was a bit taller than Tayuya, an inch maybe, and by far more petite. He swallowed, his ears becoming even more red. Gods, why did he have to sleep in the same bed with her? Why was she so nice to hold? He mentally shook of these thoughts. Then he smiled. He smiled because his family had just extended even more. He stood as the girl walked closer to the Hokage, looking as nervous as they got. "Karen," Tsunade said kindly, "thank you for waiting." The girl bowed hastily. It was my pleasure." Tsunade smiled. "Ease up, Karen. No need to be this formal. We are all family here. Though I am quite a bit farther away from you too." Karen's eyes, which Naruto noted had a slight pink tone to them, snapped up to meet his cerulean ones. The intensity of her gaze surprised him. He offered a weak, "Hi," before she launched herself at him. He was about to pry her of himself when he noticed that she was crying. He looked helplessly over at Tsunade. The woman shrugged, much to Naruto's aggravation. It wasn't cool using his attitude against him. "Hey," he said eventually after some gentle petting of her head. "It's all right now." He had no idea what had been wrong to begin with, but he guessed a little assurance couldn't hurt. She jumped back, obviously embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she offered meekly, trying to dry her tears with her sleeves. "It's just, I never thought I would meet another Uzumaki again." He smiled. "Yeah, I know what you mean. My mother told me that there were very little left, if any at all." Tsunade listened intently. How the hell could he have talked to his mother? For all intents and purposes the woman had been dead ever since Naruto had been born. She would need to inquire about that. "Anyways," Tsunade said and stood up. Since Karen arrived with a lot of scrolls from the Uzumaki clan, it had been decided to finance the construction of a clan compound in the outskirts of the village. Yamato agreed to help and it should be done before the wedding. "Wedding?" Karen asked, turning pale. I don't want to." She looked at Naruto. "Nothing against you, but I have no intentions of marrying the next best Uzumaki." He laughed. Didn't she just say she didn't imagine ever finding another Uzumaki? No need to worry. He turned to Tsunade with a slight frown. "Or is there?" "No, there isn't." Tsunade sighed and sat back down again. "For now, Karen and her cousin will come to live in the same apartment complex as you, Naruto. Make sure to introduce Tayuya to them." "Cousin?" Naruto asked, turning to Karen. She nodded. "Her name is Sari. First cousin of mine. She's also somewhat a librarian of sorts." Karen smiled sadly. "She's mute, her windpipe had been crushed by one of Orochimaru's lackeys when they came for us. Her healing ability isn't as strong, so her vocal cords never fully recovered." Naruto nodded sadly. "I see." Then his smile brightened. "But she is part of the family all the same. I look forward to meeting her." He then stuck his hand out to her. "I'm Naruto, by the way." She smiled and shook his hand. Karen. Tayuya was waiting for Naruto to return. She found herself in need to talk to him. She wanted to get out of here, even if she had to be pushed around in her wheelchair. Being indoors all the time was driving her crazy. And without Naruto here, it was boring. He was fun to be around and he took her coarse language in a stride, even picking it up to some degree. It made her smile. The Uzumaki, known for stealing, red hair and cursing till kingdom come. She wanted out, roll around for all she could. Tayuya also wanted her flute back, or at least a new one. Imagine her surprise when she saw Naruto walking up to the apartment building, pulling a cart together with two red heads. She ripped the window open and leaned outside. "Ooey, shithead, who's that?" He looked up to her. Waving, he shouted back to her. "Hey there, we have gained 2 more clan members in just one day. You married another? And 2 at the same time," she exclaimed, scowling something fierce. She didn't think he'd be that type of guy. Asshole, didn't he already have her? What? No, he shouted back up, waving his hands frantically in denial. "I didn't, I swear. Tsunade made sure that they can't force me to marry another woman." Tayuya nodded to herself. Good, then she promptly turned bright red. Where did the jealousy come from? She shook herself out of it. "Then come get your ass up here, shithead." Naruto sighed as she slammed the window shut. Karen and Sari walked up to his side. The mute girl held up a piece of paper. It read, "Mad wife," and Naruto snorted. "You could say that. We were kinda forced into this but." A smile tugged at his lips. "We're getting along." Karen smiled. "She seems energetic." Naruto laughed. "That's one way of putting it." The window overhead was thrown open again. "I heard that, idiot. Now move it." "Yes, ma'am." He mock saluted and began pushing the cart again. "Fuck you," Tayuya shouted back, her ears tinged red. Sari held a piece of paper out to Karen, who took it. It read, "If they were forced into this, then whoever did it was a damn good matchmaker." Karen smiled. "So it seems," she told the girl. Sari was shorter than Karen, shorter than even Tayuya. Her red hair was short and straight, her bangs shadowing her deep violet eyes. She wore a gray traveling tunic, just like Karen, and a red choker that hid the scars left on her throat. Sari's skin was incredibly fair, her red lips a stark contrast in her face. Karen's had a more natural color and her skin wasn't as pale. One could see that they were family. They had the same nose and the ears were distinctively similar. But Tayuya looked different, showing the wide spread of the Uzumaki clan. Where Tayuya's nose and cheekbones were distinct and sharp, Karen and Sari shared softer features and a kinder, less sharp eye form than Tayuya. Pushing the cart behind the building and parking it underneath the stairs that lead up to the first floor, the 3 Uzumaki made their way to the apartment Naruto and Tayuya lived in. Karen's and Sari's was just the neighboring one. He led them inside and was nearly run over by Tayuya in her wheelchair. "Took you long enough. Come on, let's get the fuck out of here." She glared at Naruto who was sticking to the wall besides her on all fours, using chakra. "Let's fucking go." She grinned when she saw the other two's amused expression. "I'm Tayuya," she told them. "And as it stands, I'm a cripple and that idiot's wife. Now come one." Naruto was calmly pushing Tayuya through the streets of Konoha, pointing out buildings and the occasional memory of a D-ranked mission to her and the 2 newest Uzumaki. Tsunade had arranged for furniture to be moved into the apartment building and until that was over, they had nothing better to do than go shopping. The markets of Konoha were bustling with people and merchants, even in the late afternoon hours. Naruto didn't expect anything out of the ordinary to happen. The rebuilt market was mostly hastily set up stands from foreign merchants. The locals were still recovering and most funds were put into regaining the village's infrastructure and medical institutions. Food and water supply were up there in the priority list before the local economy was kick-started again. It would take some time but the village was on a good way. But just as he noticed Tayuya staring intensely at a vendor to their left, someone called out to him. "Oi, Naruto." Naruto groaned as he heard Kiba's voice. How was he going to explain these 3? Was he even allowed to tell anyone about the clan? Or that he was married? Then again, did it even matter? He sighed and turned around. Kiba, Shino and Hinata were walking towards them. He could also spot Ino and Sakura bickering about something behind Team 8. Naruto was relieved to see that Shikamaru wasn't there. He could have identified Tayuya as a former sound ninja. "Hey guys," he said with a wide smile, "how's the reconstruction effort going?" Kiba waved him off as his eyes drifted over his companions. Good, good, yeah no. He said as his eyes zeroed in on Yuya. But what's way more important? Who are those babes? Yuya had yet to take her eyes of a sleek black flute she could see in one of the displays, but being called babe had her eyebrow twitch violently. Now listen here. Yuya stopped short as her words seemed to come from Naruto's mouth. This, Naruto said with a voice so hard it could crush feeble spirits, as he put a hand on Yuya's shoulder, is Yuya. And like Karen and Sari here, he motioned to the girls, she's an Uzumaki. His semi-friendly attitude dropped and he outright glared at Kiba. Besides, she's married. Yuya's mouth shut with a loud clack of her teeth as her ears began to redden and she tried to sink into her chair. Why the hell would he simply proclaim that? Stupid, sweet, shithead. Kiba raised his hands defensively in front of him, sweating bullets as he took a step back. Whoa, alright, backing off, dude. Ever the gossip queen, Ino appeared from behind Kiba. Uzumaki? Is she, like, your sister or something? She asked. Are all of them? They don't look like you at all. What happened to your hair by the way? Who's the husband? Did you get taller by any chance? As Ino continued to rumble off questions that would not find any answer soon, Sakura stepped forward and shoved Ino's head. Shut it, piggy. Then she looked expectantly at Naruto. The, by now, deep orange-haired boy sighed. No, they aren't my sisters. They are fellow Uzumaki. From the Uzumaki clan. He tried to think of something to tell them real quick. I've known Yuya for a while and Karen and Sari arrived today. He purposefully left out the question about the husband. Why the hell did he bring it up anyways? And yeah, I've been made clan head since I'm the only remaining male Uzumaki. Kiba nodded along, then he suddenly grimaced. Oh shit, dude, they aren't going to pull the CRA on you, are they? Naruto quickly shook his head. No, I got out of that without them getting to breed me. They did try though. Stupid elders. Shino pushed his shades up. You have been really lucky then. Why? Because right now, Konoha can use every bit of power we can get. Yuya's blood returned from her ears and she noticed the Hyuga girl sigh in relief. She narrowed her eyes. What did that bitch have to be relieved about? As Naruto got drawn into a conversation, Yuya noticed that he seemed uncomfortable. Her eyes swayed from him and over his friends. She frowned. If one could call those cowering in fear, friends. Yuya knew fear, she could see it in all of them, practically smell it in the air. She glanced around and found that everyone looked upon Naruto with awe and fear. Aside from the children, they were afraid of him. All of them. Kiba stood too far away from him, his posture too diminutive for an Inuzuka. Shino was as tense as it got in the Hyuga girl. Well, she might have been a nutcase. Sakura and Ino walked up to her, but she noticed that they placed her between them and Naruto. What the hell? Karen and Sari had taken the opportunity to do some shopping with the money they had been given. It had been their money to begin with, but they just relented everything to their clan head, namely Naruto, once they arrived. How very nice of them. So you're married? Who's the husband? Ino asked excitedly. Yuya was at loss for words. Should she just straight up tell them it was Naruto? Would he want that? But she was saved by Sakura. Shut up, piggy, we probably don't even know him. Yuya relaxed but found her breath hitch when Sakura asked, so how is he? Tell us about him. Ino nodded. Yes. Is he handsome? Yuya glanced at Naruto to make sure he wasn't listening. I guess so, yes. The girls squealed. Fuck. Yuya cursed in surprise. Do you have to be so damn loud? She was ignored as the next question was fired. Is he nice? Yes. Is he strong? I suppose. And, how's he in bed? Yuya's ears had camouflaged themselves and hid in her hair. Suspiciously enough, Naruto's also reddened considerably. Damn his enhanced hearing. What's wrong? Kiba asked him. Naruto laughed uneasily. It's a bit hot, you know? The Inuzuka shrugged. I guess. Anyways, we're headed to the Hokage, do some missions. He waved and retreated hastily. See you guys later. As his eyes lingered on Yuya again, Naruto scowled. He shooed Ino and Sakura away from the steaming Yuya as she cursed their entire existence under her breath and pushed her towards Karen and Sari, who were inspecting various articles of clothing from a foreign merchant. When no one was looking at him, he made a single clone that hanged immediately and sent it off. Ya found something? He heard Yuya ask the two Uzumaki girls. As he returned his attention to them, His eyes drifted over the people around them. And for a second, he could have sworn to have met a pair of sad lavender eyes. Half an hour later he received the memories of his clone and he smirked. The smirk was wiped of his face when Tayuya jabbed him in the ribs. She glared up at him when he suddenly stopped in the middle of the street. "Something up, shithead?" she asked, none too little bite in her voice. He waved her off. "Nah, everything's fine. Come on, it looks like Karen found a dress for you." Tayuya looked horrified. "No, no, fuck you. Don't you dare just leaving me with them. No." Her screams of protest were smothered by layer upon layer of pink, fluffy dress gowns. Tayuya was out on her own for once. Naruto had been called into Tsunade's office and Karen and Sari were dead set on looking at the place their compound was to be built on. She was just glad that she hadn't been dragged along. Tayuya still held it against the two of them that they had stuffed her into a frilly purple dress complete with a bow in her hair. A bow that was still present in her hair, not that she had noticed. Naruto had wanted to say something but she threw her shoe in his face so he remained silent instead. It was amazing how fast a majority of the village had been rebuilt. Not half a year ago the village had been but a crater. Now it was a village inside a crater. Which irritated her to no end because now there was always a slant in the road that would have her roll towards the center of the village. Thankfully, Naruto's apartment was dead center of Konoha. So if she ever got lost she just would head downhill and end up in front of the building. Because the roads got steeper the further she got from the center, Tayuya stayed relatively close by as she rolled herself through the busy streets, watching the construction workers and merchants argue, hissing at children that nearly ran her over, and lastly, and most unfortunately, meeting Sakura and Ino as she passed what she assumed to be the hospital. "Tayuya," the girl cringed. Sakura's voice, the pitch it carried, it just grated her ears. She spun around with a frown. "What?" The two of them didn't even slow down at her obvious disdain for their presence. Ino took the liberty of pushing her wheelchair into Tayuya, for the simple reason that her arms were fucking tired. Let her do it. "We wondered," the girl suddenly said after some silence, "what's the deal with you and Naruto?" Sakura, walking ahead of turned around. "Yeah, like, what's your deal?" Tayuya scowled. "What's it to you?" Shrugging, Ino pushed her into what appeared to be a park. "He seemed smitten with you. Shame you're married, huh?" Tayuya snorted. "Fuck no. The guy's a shithead, nothing more." They came to halt underneath a tree that had been planted there recently. "That's so?" Sakura wondered. "I say he likes you." "Well, fucking shame. I hate him," Tayuya hissed, tough her ears burned red. "Ouch," Ino remarked. "That's harsh." Tayuya grit her teeth. "Stupid bitches. If I weren't in this fucking wheelchair, I wouldn't even be around him. Now let me the fuck go." Forcefully propelling herself forward, Tayuya rolled away from them, headed to wherever. She needed to think about this idiot whose name alone had her heartbeat faster. Naruto, as it was, stood still atop the tree she had rested under. He had intended to pick her up after his meeting had finished. He didn't move, his eyes following her red hair in the crowd until her lost sight of her. He looked down at his hand, looking at his palm, each finger he inspected individually. Clenching it into a fist he looked up at the sky. If he was a means to an end to her, so be it. It seemed that his hands couldn't hold on to the things he cared about. And he hated it. He vanished without a trace, determined to forget about her hurtful words. He had ignored them all his life. So why did hers hurt so much more? "Happy birthday." Tayuya just blinked up at Naruto, mouth still agape and eyes wide. What?" she asked, for the third time. Naruto rolled his eyes. "You heard me, happy birthday." He held the small box out for her yet again. It was warped in bright orange paper, so orange that it seemed to gleam in the morning light. "But my damn birthday's in February," she finally snapped back, scowling at him. "And who told you that?" Naruto asked. "Orochi." "Aw fuck." Tayuya sagged a little, but Naruto was quick to continue and pressed the box into her lap. "So, since today you can get out of that wheelchair of yours, we are marking a new beginning in your life, if not the beginning. Meaning that today, the 9th of October, could be as good as your birthday." She stared at the box. "And you got me a present?" Not to mention that it was the first real present she got since the days she spent with her mother. Tayuya remembered telling Naruto that she didn't remember ever celebrating her birthday with her mother. That didn't mean they never did, just that she forgot. As far as Tayuya was aware, the 15th of February had been the day that Orochimaru had abducted her. And at every following birthday, she got to try a new medicine or a technique the bastard had developed. Naruto placed a hand on his chest, looking deeply offended all of a sudden. Of course, he huffed indignantly, what kind of husband would I be if I didn't? Tayuya grimaced. You know, you don't have to act on it. They don't expect you to. With a sigh, he sat down on the bed, his back to her. It hurt, Tayuya thought. It hurt that he had dropped the act so willingly, so fast. But then he turned and frowned at her. I did say, I try to love you. I am acting. No, I'm not acting at all, actually. I'm doing this because I want to. End of the story. He nudged her leg beneath the blanket. Now come on, open it. Tayuya doubted his words, then again, it was he who had told her that words were empty until backed by action. She shook her head and tugged a little at the blue ribbon that sat atop the box, neatly creating the Uzumaki swirl. You had Sari packed this, right? She laughed when his face fell. With the mood lightened, she finally ripped the paper off. Underneath was a wooden box. The box itself was about as long as her forearm, hand included. Did he get her a knife? A short sword? A set of shuriken? She could use all of that, if only to throw it at him when he annoyed her. Pillows were too soft. Smiling a little, she opened it and stopped. Naruto swallowed nervously. Tayuya didn't move. She just stared into the open box and at the item that lay atop the velvet cushion inside. He reached out to get her attention but stopped when he saw her eyes. She was crying. With a deep breath, Naruto stood up and left her to her thoughts. He knew that this was a heavy gift to give. He just hoped she could appreciate it. Naruto left the room silently, put on his jacket and stepped out into the fresh morning air. He was about to go down to fetch something from the baker when the door beside him opened. It was the apartment that belonged to Karen and Sari. Both girls nearly ran into him, arms loaded with scrolls and, curiously enough, an enormous stuffed bear. Naruto, Karen exclaimed, morning. So, how did she like it? Sari nodded as energetically as all the scrolls underneath her chin allowed it. He chuckled weakly. I don't know. She has to accept it yet. It is something special for her, after all. Karen nodded. Don't worry though. She'll love it. Now come help us carry that stuff over to the compound. The storage is finished. We'll have the party when Tayuya is fully awake and, happy with her gift. Naruto nodded and reached for a big scroll in Sari's arms but then he stopped. Say, he began, why didn't you seal everything here in one scroll? Isn't that easier to carry? Karen smiled sheepishly. We could, she admitted, but neither me nor Sari have enough chakra to push that many potent sealing scrolls into a storage scroll without damaging them. But I do, remember? Naruto said, grinning when Karen's eyes widened. She turned to the door and banged her head against it. Damn it, she exclaimed. All right, everything inside again. Ouch. Rubbing her shin at the calf of her other leg. She glared over at Sari, who had a piece of paper in her mouth. Naruto wondered how she even wrote it but he laughed anyways as it read, idiot, in big, bold letters. The compound was far bigger than Naruto had imagined. The walls surrounding it were made of ornate wood, no doubt created by Yamato. Inside these walls, a good dozen of workers were building the main house. It was big, far too big in Naruto's mind, and appeared to be relatively modern. They were building a real mansion here. The library was a separated building, many pillars with a spiral pattern holding up the tiled roof. Unsurprisingly, the tiles were bright red and Naruto had no doubt about the fact that the mansion roof would also be bright red. The great wooden door was a deep blue and the Uzumaki swirl was engraved into the wood. Naruto could tell that it was actually a seal. As they approached the building, Naruto turned to Karen. Who have you engraved the seal? Karen smiled, holding the scroll in hands that they would store in the shrine-like building. Sari did. She styled it after the seal her mother taught her. She says it's the original from Uzushio. Naruto hummed as he stood in front of the seal. He inspected it for a moment before he bit his thumb, smeared a bit of blood over his palm and placed it against the seal. With a sharp twist of his wrist, the swirl rolled with the motion and unlocked the door. Karen grumbled something under her breath and Naruto looked at her questioningly. Sari tapped his shoulder and held up a note. She's salty because it took her 2 hours to figure out how to open it. Naruto laughed but quickly fell silent when Karen pouted angrily at him. The inside of the shrine was bare of everything but a stone pedestal in the middle. It was made to hold a singular scroll and stood in a cone of light that fell through the ceiling. Of course, there was no actual hole in the ceiling. It was just a one-way seal that allowed the light to fall through the roof. The walls were covered from the floor to the ceiling in shelves and holders for scrolls. Karen placed the scroll on the pedestal and the Uzumaki swirl, that was engraved into the stone, glowed red before chains emerged from it and wrapped itself around the scroll. She turned to Naruto. Now only the clan head can take it from this place, she told him. Are you talking about the scroll that you used to beat Orochimaru's head in? The black-haired boy asked. She looked strangely at him. How do you even know about that? He shrugged. Papa told me. Oh, she asked, a venomous tinge to her voice. Then you better tell your red-eyed moron of a father that he'd better keep his mouth shut. Or else I'll dig out the stories I have about him and the snake. The young Uchiha faltered. The story? She huffed. Yeah, I thought so. Naruto left it to Karen and Sari to oversee things with the workers. He had no idea how a building styled after the Uzumaki would look like, after all. The walk to his apartment was uneventful, though he did meet Ino once more. She apologized to Hai for what her father had done, and invited him and Tayuya over for dinner. The fact that she said, "You and your wife," gave away that she had been let in on the secret, if you could even call it that. Inoichi, apparently, was ashamed of himself and wanted to apologize. In the end, Naruto accepted, mainly because he knew that Tayuya would enjoy hearing the man try to amend, probably groveling before her. He was walking up the stairs when a haunting melody reached his ears and he stopped dead in his tracks. Never had he heard the tune before, but it carried such weight with it, so much emotion that Naruto had forgotten how to breathe. He shuddered, felt his skin tingle and his eyes widen. The sorrow of the music was palpable in the air, the pain it conveyed so deep he could barely grasp it. The notes climbed higher and higher, yet the mood didn't seem to lift with them. No, it decreased further. He stumbled up the stairs and lost his keys thrice while trying to unlock the door. And just as he pried it open, the music changed. Slowly and subtly, it evolved, from a deep depression into something akin to tranquility. Falling in over his own defeat, he stumbled through the living room, and just as he was about to open the door to Tayuya's room, the music took on a happy note. And he couldn't help but smile. Naruto swallowed thickly. For some reason he couldn't explain, he was out of breath. He grasped the doorknob carefully and slowly turned it. The door swung open and Tayuya. She actually stood, by the window. The flute he had gifted her pressed to her soft lips as her fingers danced slowly over it, producing sounds that Naruto hadn't thought possible. He took a step towards her, and another, and slowly, almost reverently walked over to her. She stopped playing when he stopped at her side, and he was so close to beg her to continue. Her eyes opened and, they were different. Her eyes were alive, her deep violet eyes, her amethyst eyes, were alight with so many emotions, and all of them her music had radiated through the air. But the most prominent one, the one visible in her features, was genuine happiness. Her smile so light, so freely given, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The fire in her eyes, the fire that burned in her soul, had not been diminished by all the atrocities her life had led her though. She was proud, she was strong, she was beautiful. And, this woman, she was his wife. His mouth was dry, as if the desert had switched place with his tongue, so when he opened his mouth to say something to her, he couldn't. Just some sort of strangled noise escaped him, and she laughed. She laughed so hard she had to steady herself against him, and it took a considerable amount of willpower to not draw her into him right then and there. "Is that all?" she rasped, still laughing loudly. "That's all you idiot can say? You can't be freaking serious." She nearly doubled over and Naruto pulled her up again. He smiled sheepishly at her, still enchanted by her sheer beauty. "You did have me speechless right there." She knocked her forehead against his chin, still laughing a little. "Shut up, my music wasn't that good." He lifted her chin with his right hand and stared into her eyes. "I wasn't talking about the music." Tayuya's smile slipped away, making way for curiosity, for doubt and fear. She was afraid of him, of what he could say. Naruto bit back his grimace and kept holding on to her. "But," he spoke again, "your music was just about the most beautiful thing I ever heard." He smiled reassuringly at her, and he could feel that it worked a little. You remember, right? That I told you. I would try to love you. He swallowed when she nodded carefully. And, you're making it quite easy, you know? Ah, that's so sweet. The pink-haired girl squealed. She was hopping up and down at the foot of her bed. She smiled at the child. Makoto, the pink-haired girl, daughter of Sakura Uchiha and Sasuke Uchiha, and her black-haired twin brother Shisui Uchiha, named after his honorary uncle. The parents did the kid a favor and didn't name him Itachi. Think of the burden of the name. These two were born on an eventful afternoon 5 years ago. Imagine Tayuya's surprise when Sakura announced that she was pregnant again. It was ridiculous, and Sasuke wasn't even in the village all that often. That horny bastard. The little Inuzuka, Kaiba, a name she'd never understand how Tamaki agreed to it, was the son of Kiba and Tamaki Inuzuka. The most surprising thing about him was the fact that his partner was a cat and not a dog, as it would have been custom with the Inuzuka. Speaking of the little kitten, she hadn't seen it yet. Then again, they were forbidden in the hospital, moreover so in the maternity ward. Finally, there was Ino's brat. Just 4 years old and already a gossip queen to boot. Inori, they named her, to follow tradition. Tayuya could bet that Sai didn't find the name artistic in any way he could think of, but no one would dare talk to the post-labor Ino about that. She and Makoto made a perfect team, and she'd swear that no one could spread news as fast as them. Come to think of it, she spoke aloud. Where is Shikadai? Shouldn't the Nara kid be with you as well? They all gave her a deadpan look, and Shisui said, he's too lazy. Tayuya snorted. Figures. Tamari would get to swing her fan again. Damn lazy Nara clan. Just then, the door opened and Sakura walked inside, dressed in her medic uniform. For a second, Tayuya was confused about her appearance, but then she remembered that she had taken over as head medic since Tsunade retired. Sakura smiled at her and turned a glare at the children, especially her twins. Didn't I tell you to stay out of the maternity ward? Why are you all here? She questioned, looking at each of them individually. Everyone turned to stare at Ino, who squeaked and fell of the bed. Sakura rounded the bed and picked her up. I'm listening, she said dangerously. Mommy told me to. And so Inori stuttered. Sakura sighed and let the girl drop back onto the bed. She scrambled up to Tayuya and tried to hide under her long red hair, which was laid out to her left. Hey, Tayuya snapped, don't you dare get entangled in there. Inori. Everyone turned to the door, where one flustered Ino Yamanaka was standing, behind her the ever-angry doctor from the hallway. The guy seemed about ready to blow a gasket. The little blonde girl squeaked and tried to shuffle herself beneath Tayuya's pillow, but the Uzumaki wasn't having any of that. She grabbed the girl by her purple top and held her out for the mother to take. Now would someone take these bratty kids away? She huffed. Where is Tamaki when I need her? As Ino grabbed her daughter and berated her on annoying pregnant woman, the other two female Uzumaki stepped into the room. Karen and Sari both, as it was now Uzumaki clan custom, had hair long enough to reach their waist, though Sari's bangs still hid her eyes and Karen's were brushed to the side and held there by an orange clip. Tayuya grinned, remembering how Naruto had gifted it to her. For a week she refused to wear it, only for Sari to wear the same one a day after the wedding. Hey there sister, Karen greeted, did it start yet? Tayuya shook her head and fondly patted her sizable baby bump. Nah, little brat takes her time. Sari held up a note. So it's a girl? Of course it is. She's my little girl. Tayuya exclaimed. You better damn well believe it. Sakura was meanwhile ushering the children outside. But Makoto pouted, her charcoal eyes wide. Using all the cuteness that a 5-year-old possessed, she whined, but Auntie Tayuya wasn't finished with her story yet. Sakura looked back at her. Story? She shrugged back at the medic. About how I met that knucklehead and all the stuff after that. Ino perked up upon hearing that. Oh, how far did you get? The flute, Tayuya said with a faraway look in her eyes, fondly remembering the moment. My first real birthday. Though, it would have been so much better if not for that snake woman. The mood was violently broken when the door was kicked in and a loud voice shouted, children. Anko's here to get rid of her curse mark. Tayuya and Naruto jumped apart as if the other had been cloaked in lightning. But Tayuya's legs were still weak and the step backwards had been too much and her knees gave in. In an instant, Naruto had stepped forward again, catching her just as she fell backwards. They stared silently at the other, words burning to be spoken but they couldn't find their voice. Naruto guided her backwards and gently sat her down on the bed. They finally broke eye contact when the door to the room was thrown open. "I'm here," she stated, grinning like a loon. She spotted Naruto standing in front of Tayuya, sitting on the bed. "Did I interrupt something?" Tayuya growled a bit. "That you did, bitch. Can't you fucking knock?" Anko had expected a lot. Maybe some torture or shouting, a deathmatch even, but certainly no foreplay. True, they were married, but from what Anko knew, Naruto had no reason to even move a finger for the girl's well-being. People were really painting the wrong picture of him. She shook her head. "Well, excuse me, little lady, but I am damn eager to get rid of that mark. I finished my mission as fast as possible to get back." She turned to Naruto. "Now, pretty please?" Naruto sighed and ruffled his hair a bit. "Fine, sit down on the couch please." As Anko walked out with a spring in her step, he looked back at Tayuya. I'm glad you're happy." She smiled a little and he made to follow Anko. Stepping into the living room, he stopped and frowned. "Anko, why are you undressing?" Anko, currently pulling her mesh shirt over her head, didn't even spare him a glance as she continued undressing. "I thought you might need access," she purred. Naruto's left eyebrow twitched as he tried not to blush. "No, I don't, so please, dress yourself." She just shrugged energetically, which had her very much naked breasts bounce. "Nah, I'm good. You do know I am married, right?" Naruto asked with a sigh, his hand massaging his forehead. Anko shrugged. "So? She's just one of Orochimaru's lackeys, right?" Naruto froze. He removed the hand that had previously shielded his eyes very slowly and glared at Anko. His eyes were hard, an anger boiling in them that Anko hadn't seen before. "Anko," he began lowly, "watch what you say. Whatever she was before doesn't matter. Now she is my family. And for the record, if she's just one of Orochimaru's former lackeys, then you, Anko, are nothing more than that, if not worse, given that you still bear his seal. So don't talk bullshit. I hate hypocrites nearly as much as liars." Lips curling in distaste, Anko grumbled something under her breath and began dressing herself. Tayuya, standing behind the door to her room, had a hand over her chest and a small smile on her lips. "Why did I have to be nearly crippled for all the good shit to happen to me?" she whispered to herself. She took a deep breath and walked out of her room. She came to stand beside Naruto and purposefully leaned against him to take a bit of the strain of her legs. Anko watched them from the corner of her eyes. Naruto didn't stiffen when Tayuya just casually leaned against him. If anything, he even leaned into her a little as well. How could these two be so cute together? Anko would have put her money on the red hair. The boy must have had a thing for it. Now that she was fully dressed again, Naruto pushed the coffee table out of the way and sat down in front of her. She frowned when for several seconds, he didn't move at all. She was about to poke him with her feet when his eyes suddenly snapped open. Anko had to suppress a shudder. These golden eyes. They reminded her of Orochimaru for a second. But, they weren't. Naruto's eyes were golden, not yellow, and there was warmth in them, not the insanity that was home to Orochimaru's very core. He held his hands out for her to take. "Okay," he said, "no matter what, you can't let go. I don't know if this is going to hurt. Tayuya was in a coma-like state when I did this with her, so you better brace yourself." When Anko nodded, he continued. "Your seal is by far weaker than Tayuya's was, and the amount of chakra in it is not as potent. It also seems to lack the kill switch that Tayuya's had. Are you ready?" Anko set her jaw and nodded. Naruto took a deep breath and at first, she felt nothing, but then her seal came alive with a vengeance, painting her so much more than it ever had before. She could feel it, feel the chakra move out of the seal, like acid pouring into her veins. The taste of blood had her notice that she was nearly biting through her own lips, and only when she opened her mouth did she notice she was biting back a scream. It felt all so surreal, the pain was pushing her away. It felt as if it wasn't even her body anymore, and yet it hurt so much more than everything else. The acid was now running down her arms, she could see her coils blackening underneath her skin. After an agonizing minute, the chakra from the seal had reached her hand, and then, it got worse. It was ripped from her, the chakra resisting with all its might as it clawed at her coils, grating her nerves and setting her insides on fire. Suddenly there was a pull on her neck, as if a string had been pulled taut. With a heave, the seal was pulled away, it literally exploded of her neck and was sucked inwards, her head was snapped to the side by the force of it. With one last agonized shout, Anko passed out, the seal gone from her neck and a hole in the wall behind Naruto. Tayuya hobbled to his side and to check if he was alright. When he had taken the seal of her, he hadn't been that exhausted. "You okay?" she asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. He smiled tiredly up at her. "So you do care," he said with a smile so sweet it set Tayuya's ears on fire. She scrunched up her face as her cheeks tinged red. "Idiot," she grumbled and went to settle down on the couch. As a fact, the unconscious Anko was sprawled out all across. Tayuya sniffed angrily and shoved her off the couch. Even as she impacted on the carpet below, she didn't stir. Naruto pushed himself up and looked down at Anko. Then he looked over at his coffee table and back at Anko again. Shrugging, he pulled Anko out of the way by her feet and returned the coffee table to its original place. "So," Tayuya said, "we gonna leave the bitch there?" Naruto shrugged. "Hell, I'm too tired to make even one clone and I sure as hell won't carry her ass back." Tayuya snorted a laugh and after a little hesitation, and a determined but thoughtful look in her face, she leaned on Naruto's shoulder. She glared up at him, blushing a little when he grinned tiredly. "Don't get any ideas, lover boy." Karen and Sari opened the door to Naruto's apartment with a loud bang, jolting husband and wife awake, who had fallen asleep on the couch. "Happy birthday," Karen exclaimed. Sari, standing right behind her, was waving an impressive red banner with black letters which read the same as Karen had shouted. Naruto had exploded of the couch when the door was banged open. His feet got caught under the small table before him and he did a spectacular salto right through the hole in the wall. Tayuya fell sideways as Naruto jumped, falling onto the couch face first with a muffled, "Oof." "What the hell?" Karen wondered as she and Sai stepped inside. The two of them chose to ignore the unconscious women in the doorway and carried their stuff inside. Before Tayuya could even begin to curse, Karen put an enormous cake down in front of her. Why is there a hole in your wall?" Tayuya blinked owlishly at the round cake that, but of course, was shaped like an Uzumaki spiral. "What is that?" While Tayuya was busy being sleepy and confused, Sari took it upon herself to attach her banner over the kitchen range that separated the living room from the kitchen. Happy with her handiwork, she pulled out a scroll from which she unsealed the teddy bear she had with her in the morning. Nodding to herself, she placed it on the couch to sit beside Tayuya. She nudged the girl using the bear's fluffy paws and smiled widely at her when she turned around to face her. When she didn't respond aside from the confused look she got, Sari continued to poke her with the teddy bear. Tayuya swapped the fluffy bear away. "Stop, Shesh. What is all this?" she said, gesturing to the cake and the banner. Sari rolled her eyes and twisted Tayuya's head towards the banner and pointed at it. Karen laughed. "It's your birthday party, dummy." Then she looked around. "Say, where is Naruto?" Hanging out in the tree outside of the apartment was the young man in question. Having launched himself right into the branches of the green waiting outside, Naruto was busy brushing leaves out of his hair. "God damn it," he grumbled as he turned around in the leaves to gain some sort of footing on the bigger branch below. But just as he was about to hop down the tree, his still enhanced senses picked up a presence nearby. Whirling around, and losing his balance, Naruto managed to spot a masked ninja, an ANBU, flicker away from atop the water tower across the street before he so ungracefully dropped out of the tree. But his mask had been blank. No animal, nor was there any kind of sign Naruto could have seen. Just a blank white mask and, judging by the fleeting feel he got for the masked ninja's emotions, he had none. At the very moment Naruto tried to ascertain what the figure felt, it felt nothing at all. "Well, that's fucking strange," Naruto mumbled as he pushed himself off the grassy ground. More than strange, the voice of the fox roared through his mind, even though Naruto was sure that the fox wasn't roaring, just talking. His size just amplified the volume to truly painful levels. So Naruto winced once before the fox continued. "This human is but an empty shell. He has been broken into servitude." Naruto frowned. "Seriously? That sounds an awful lot like Danzo's minions." He would have contemplated further if not for the shoe that hit his head. "What the hell?" He rubbed his head as he picked up the fluffy purple slipper. That, as Naruto recalled, was Tayuya's. He had placed them in her room for her cold feet. Looking up to the hole in his wall, he saw Tayuya waving down angrily at him, though she seemed more happy than angry at the time. "Get up here," she shouted, and Naruto had a kind sense of déjà vu. So he mock saluted with a brisk, "Yes, Mom," and used the body flicker to appear right in front of her. He knelt down and offered her slipper. "Your shoe, kind lady." Tayuya halted to process what the fuck he was doing, but just ended up blushing as he took her foot and slipped the shoe back on. She was about to verbally kick his ass for acting like a prissy when he just turned around with an exclamation of, "Ooh. Cake." Tayuya decided to let it slip. Only this once. About 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Naruto, who had been stuffing his face with cake while Tayuya tried to defend the remnants of her birthday cake, groaned and placed his plate onto the table and headed for the door. Opening it, he was surprised to see Tsunade and Shizune. "Granny," he exclaimed in surprise, "what are you doing here?" Tsunade huffed. "Well, the wife of a clan head is celebrating her birthday and the Hokage has decided to make a courtesy call." Naruto just nodded. "Aha, so it was your Anbu who watched us?" A frown appeared on Tsunade's face and she glanced back at Shizune, who frowned as well and shook her head. "We don't have any Anbu watching you," Tsunade said. "Damn," Naruto cursed. "Then I need to talk to Sai about a little gardening." Tsunade caught the meaning and grit her teeth. "Oh, I swear, Gonzo's gonna have a bad day tomorrow." Shaking of the bad mood, Naruto bid the two women inside. Pointedly ignoring the unconscious form of Anko in the doorway, they congratulated Tayuya, who appeared extremely uncomfortable but happy nonetheless. She just wasn't used to all this, to her own birthday party. She would have to get used to it, Naruto told her, and it made her smile. She could deal with that. Fuck yeah, cake. Naruto mentally noted that Tayuya fucking loved strawberry marmalade and chocolate. She nearly inhaled whatever piece of cake she got. Choji would have been impressed. "Now then," Tsunade announced as the sun began to settle, "it's time to start the real party." That said, Tsunade produced 4 bottles of sake from the confides of her cleavage. Tayuya wondered if there was a hollow space in there. Shizune looked appalled. "Lady Tsunade." She shrieked but was quickly silenced when the Hokage shoved one of the bottle halfway down her throat. Forced to swallow a good amount of sake before she got rid of the intruding bottle, Shizune found that maybe it wasn't that bad after all. That and the words felt too heavy to be spoken. Tayuya laughed heartily and Naruto wondered when she had gotten her hands on a bottle herself, and wondered even more so when she had emptied half of it. And 5 minutes later, Naruto found himself with his very own bottle. He had never really been one for drinking but found himself unable to resist the challenge to drink Tayuya and Karen under the table. Sari was excused from this, her throat not in the best of conditions to allow alcohol in. "I promise," Tsunade slurred to Sari, leaning onto the younger girl, "I'll heal fish. AFF. AFF. Affliction of Yorsh." The Uzumaki kid but nod. Her hands were trapped under Tsunade's bosom as the woman lay halfway on top of her on the couch. Sari took a moment to look around. Karen was drunk. It was easiest to be described as that. Currently, she was crouching unsteadily over Anko's still unconscious form and was drawing something on her exposed belly with some red crayons. Or maybe it was lipstick. Shizune was explaining to Naruto how to properly give birth to a child. And Naruto sat there, listening with rapt attention and half-lidded eyes as if he was sure to be able to do it after her instructions were over. Tayuya was sitting beside Naruto, or his lap, really. She kind of lay halfway across his lap, sometimes only her legs, and every now and then she would slide to sit completely in his lap. And whenever she did, Naruto's arm would wander to snake around her waist. After a minute of being held, her face slowly turned red, she let out some profanities and slid off again, only to repeat the process 2 minutes later. Sari heard snoring from Tsunade and resigned herself to sleep smothered by the 5th Hokage when suddenly someone knocked at the door. Tsunade, being the hardened shinobi she was, reacted instantly and launched herself up and, well, she did as Naruto did and flew out through the hole in the wall. Karen squeaked and fell forward onto Anko, and in the same breath, Shizune fell backwards as Naruto jumped to his feet with Tayuya in his arms. There was a tense second of silence only broken by the snoring of Anko and the cursing from outside that was no doubt Tsunade damning the existence of a tree. Naruto walked to the door, Tayuya still clinging to him as she tried to appear as intimidating as possible in his arms. Slowly and carefully, Naruto reached for the doorknob, as if it would suddenly move out of the way if he moved too fast. The door opened and Tayuya tried her best to snarl, but a fit of giggles hit her right then. So when the door opened and Kakashi Hitaki, a big plushy fox in his arms, got to see a pretty interesting picture. There was his student, a red-headed girl in his arms a second before he suddenly just dropped her and shouted, "Kakashi Shenshei," followed by a mix of giggles and curses by Tayuya from the ground. Behind his student, at the end of the hallway, was Anko, lying passed out in the doorway with Karen on top of her. The red-headed girl glanced over the sizable mounds of the passed-out ninja, eyeing him like an anxious animal. On the couch he could see through the door was a girl he hadn't met before. She looked positively amused and waved lamely at him using the paw of a stuffed teddy bear. As he returned the wave and was about to say something to Naruto, who was currently scooping up his wife, he was suddenly punched in the side and sent flying. Tsunade took Kakashi's place and glared inside the apartment. "Shomon, answer the damn door," and with that, she passed out. Tayuya was swatting weakly at Naruto as Kakashi was dragging himself and the plushie back up the stairs to the apartment. "You dropped me, you idiot," she slurred, another giggle escaping her. I'm sorry," Naruto blurted after a second of apparently really hard thinking. "I'll make it up to you. Whatever you want." Face scrunching up in thought, Naruto stared at what he would have called the cutest expression she had ever made. She was biting her lower lip while at the same time her tongue stuck out at the edge of her mouth. Her eyes were unfocused and her brows knitted together as she sat there in front of him. Eventually she noticed his intense staring and hid her face in her hands. If an overdose of cute and beautiful could cause nosebleed, Naruto would have died this very instant. "You," she suddenly said, and he nearly squeaked in surprise, "you're going to sleep with me?" "No way you said that." Ino laughed hysterically. Karen laughed loudly as well while Sakura looked absolutely scandalized. Sari had left the room with the children in tow, furiously scribbling notes to keep them occupied while she was out to find the rest of the parents, mainly Naruto. Tayuya stuck her nose up in the air. "Sure did." There was a notable amount of pride in her voice. "Damn, I don't remember anything after Kakashi waltzed in," Karen mumbled. Ino looked at her strangely. "You had a blackout?" Karen laughed weakly. "Maybe." "She never could hold her liquor," Tayuya said, and Karen glared at her. Anyways, Naruto's head tilted as he tried to comprehend what Tayuya had just said. In fact, it continued to tilt until he could not lean his head to the side anymore, and so his whole body began tilting sideways until he, with Tayuya still in his arms, just rolled sideways into the pantry. However that may have been possible, Tayuya ended up beneath him as he just stared at her and managed an intangible, "Huh?" Defiance struck Tayuya's features, though the seriousness she intended to display would not reach through the alcohol in her system. Instead she managed an adorable glare coupled with a pout. You heard me all right?" she slurred, but to Naruto it sounded more like purring anyways. "I'm tired. Wanna sleep, idiot." It took Naruto a total of 14 seconds to incorporate her statement into her earlier request. Not that Tayuya even noticed that there was such a long pause. The moment she had finished speaking, Tayuya had turned her head away and spotted a box of chocolate in the shelf. In no time at all she was happily munching away at the contents of the box. "Fucking delicious," she'd mutter ever so often while she watched Naruto think. He looked so handsome, even with his eyes drooping and his hair so disheveled. She buried her embarrassment in the chocolate until she was suddenly lifted up again. Naruto looked down at her and smiled. "Sleeping does sound good." She never noticed that the slur had left his voice and his eyes were no longer glazed over. She just nodded happily to herself and quickly devoured another piece of the delicious sweets. Swiftly stepping over Anko and Shizune on his way to his bedroom, Naruto made sure to get Tayuya to leave the chocolate behind. These stains wouldn't come out easily, after all. He idly wondered where his sudden clarity was coming from as he carried Tayuya inside and laid her on the bed. He took his shirt off without any hesitation. Maybe there was still some alcohol left, and could barely stop Tayuya from rolling off the bed. She snorted a laugh and began wiggling out of her clothes. All the water vanished from Naruto's mouth as he watched her less than sensual way of undressing. He had a hard time deciding what the hell he should do now. Dress her again so she wouldn't kill him in the morrow? Just leave her here and hope she wouldn't notice him leaving? But deep down, he didn't want to leave her alone. He wanted to lay down with her, hold her and keep her warm. But, wasn't he taking advantage of her drunken state? He looked over at her when the shuffling of cloth subsided. Her amethyst eyes stared at him and he was shocked to see the tears in them. To Yuya, what? So you don't want to, huh? There was no slur in her voice anymore, just a sad note, anger, disappointment. So in the end, I'm just the former lackey of the snake bastard. She turned away from him and pulled the blankets up to cover half her head. That's not true. Naruto snapped with more anger than he had intended to. He left her no time for a snarky remark as he just slipped underneath the sheets behind her. She tensed for a second as he paused before pulling her into him, laying his arm across her flat stomach. Yuya lifted her head without a word as he slid his other arm beneath it. Resting on his biceps, she exhaled almost happily. He could feel a hint of mischief from her and he gasped. You baited me into this, he exclaimed in shock. Yuya remained silent. After a second, he snorted and laughed a little. Yuya, he said, you do know that, please, would have been enough? Shut up. Wanna sleep, was all of an answer he got. And he was fine with it. He smiled and pulled her closer. Somehow, she fit there, lying against him, perfectly. Kakashi stumbled into the apartment with the relatively unharmed plush toy still clutched in his hands. He raised an eyebrow as he watched Sari drag the passed-out Tsunade onto the couch in Naruto's living room. Walking up the hallway, he halted when he stood in front of the sleeping Anko. He dimly remembered Karen being here as well. Crouching down beside her, he poked at her face. He idly noted the childish drawing of a snake on her exposed stomach. Wakey, wakey Anko. Time to go home, he said. I'm not going to. Suddenly, Anko's eyes shot open and her hands came up to his neck. There was a tense moment of apprehension, but her hands merely encircled his neck, not strangulating him. Tension morphed into confusion when she pulled herself up to him and pressed her forehead against his. Shut up and kiss me. Kakashi's one visible eye widened. Oh she. He quickly substituted with a pillow from the couch, nearly landing atop of Tsunade in the process. But he wasn't allowed a single moment of respite as Anko appeared behind him. Oh Kakashi Tilda. She purred, eyes gleaming. Guess who got something to celebrate Tilda? Kakashi whimpered as he fled, jumping through the hole in the wall. Mommy, get that sweet piece of ass back here. Anko's finally free and ready for some fun. And with that, both vacated the apartment. Sari was left standing in the war zone of an apartment and sighed. This must have been the most fucked up clan birthday party ever. She thought to herself before retreating into her own apartment, not caring for Karen, who lay passed out underneath the coffee table with Shizune. Danzo sent the messenger away and returned to his chair. Things needed to happen quickly now that the two other Uzumaki were here. There was no need for that foul-mouthed woman anymore. And Danzo knew just the man to take her off his hands. He flared his chakra in a specific frequency and a door opened in the wall behind him, previously being hidden from view. A man with a nondescript mask stepped out and bowed without a word. Danzo held a scroll out for him to take. To Orochimaru. No delays, he ordered, not turning around to face his underling. The masked ninja simply took the scroll and vanished through the hidden door. Danzo stood from his chair and walked out of his office. It was time to redirect some Anbu patrols. Yuya awoke with a headache worse than anything the cursed seal had ever done to her. She stifled a groan as she cracked one eye open. This, she realized, was not her room. As more and more awareness returned to her hungover mind, she also realized that the arm her head rested on and the arms slung around her waist were also most definitely not hers. Memories slowly trickled back into the forefront of her mind and she groaned in embarrassment. Why did she do that? Though in hindsight, she couldn't deny that she hadn't slept this good since. Well, since the last time she had slept in the same bed as Naruto. That guy was just too good of a heater. A deep, sleepy chuckle from the man in question had her freeze up. Morning sunshine, he whispered into her hair, how's your head doing? Killing me, she moaned and clenched her eyes shut against the light that fell through the window. I'm never drinking again. He laughed, the noise vibrating against her, bare back. Gods above, where were her clothes? You say that now, but Granny has another reason today to bust out some of her sake. That's so? Damn, I'm gonna die. Naruto just chuckled quietly and pulled her closer to him. So, she said, why am I naked? The Uzumaki's eyes shot open wide as he paled considerably. His calm and collected attitude vanishing instantly. And I take it that's your knee in me ass cheeks? Ah, yes? Now he was starting to sweat. Shit. God damn male anatomy. Nice try, he could hear her knuckles crack. And somewhere in the pure world, a man with long white hair and red facial markings was writing in a small notebook, giggling like a schoolgirl until a woman with long red hair drove his noggin into the ground. Rubbing his sore head, Naruto stood in the kitchen, fixing himself and Tayuya some breakfast. He glanced over his shoulder at the redhead at the table and immediately turned around again as she shot him a death glare. Damn it, it wasn't his fault that she somehow managed to undress herself and him in her sleep. It was her body that caused him to. Yeah, no, not going there. After placing a bowl of rice with a few hastily produced side dishes in front of her, Tayuya mellowed down a little. Also, the plush fox she had in her lap helped. The Nine Tails felt honored and ridiculed at the same time, a feat only achievable by millennia-old, grumpy entities that somehow came off as a fox. Say, wanna go to the compound after breakfast? He asked as he sat down in front of her. She didn't meet his eyes but nodded anyways. Good enough for him, Naruto decided. It was when he and Tayuya went outside that they found the fifth Hokage still passed out in front of their door. I expected a lot, Tayuya said, but not the fucking Hokage. Where the hell is Anko, by the way? No idea, Naruto responded as he proceeded to prod and poke Tsunade with a wooden stick. I'm gonna signal the Anbu, she's gonna pick up her and Shizune. She's still here? I didn't even see her. She's under the table in the living room. Karen's there too. Tayuya looked somewhat amazed. The table isn't that damn big. Did they fucking curl up down there? I suppose. The moment he had finished the sentence, an Anbu with a cat mask dropped down in front of him. You go, Naruto said with a nod. If you would, please. I'm not supposed to ask how you know my call sign but. I'm intrigued, the woman with the purple hair said, curiously peering down at her Hokage who was currently drooling all over herself. I can pick it up ever since I became a sage. Granny trusts you the most so she uses your call sign pretty often. He stood and stretched once before jabbing his thumb back at the apartment. You mind taking her and Shizune back to the tower? Yugo nodded briskly and headed inside. Naruto and Tayuya were walking down the stairs when they heard Yugo's voice from out of one of the windows. Now please, Lady Shizune, let go of Miss Karen. Please? It was followed by a long-suffering sigh. Wow, Tayuya said, sucks to be her. The following blast of killing intent assured both of them that Yugo had heard her just fine. The compound was coming along nicely. According to the workers, they could move into the main building by the end of the next week. Naruto came to the conclusion that a giddy and happy Tayuya was pretty damn cute. The way she was skipping all over the premise while simultaneously trying to hide the fact that she was just incredibly happy about her new home being nearly ready. So imagine her, skipping and hopping like Anko had just found out Orochimaru had died while she simultaneously scowled like Tsunade when her sake sources ran dry. After the foreman kicked them out, because Tayuya was distracting the workers and because Naruto glared every worker into a catatonic state of fear, they headed into the market. Tayuya was laughing her ass off when he tried on something orange when he was reminded of the day's date all too violently. Sakura, with the grace of a flying sack of bricks, broke into the shop and shouted, "Happy birthday." And that's how the surprise party in a random backyard that apparently belonged to the Hyuga clan began. His momentary confusion was only extended when from seemingly everywhere his friends popped up to congratulate him. Team 8, Team 10, who Naruto didn't see until it was too late, Team Guy, Iruka, Tuchi and Ayame, the gate guards Azumo and Katetsu, Gaara and his siblings. Whereas the former's congratulations were wholly lost in the chorus of everyone else's voice, Koyuki, or better known as Princess Gale, Karen and Sari, Shizune and a hungover Tsunade, and last but also definitely the latest, Kakashi. How Naruto could have forgotten his own birthday. Maybe it was the fact that his manhood woke up in a far too dangerous yet very pleasing position which had earned him a severe concussion. Or maybe it was the fact that Tayuya wasn't as modest as she tended to enact when she walked out of the bathroom with less than a towel. In fact, Tayuya had twisted a lot things in his life and, really, as long as it wasn't his throat or other useful extremities, Naruto didn't mind. Geez, this woman. And she just happened to be his wife. Damn, and why was he happy about that again? His birthday had never really been celebrated before. It just never came up. He only ever had done so, with Jiraiya. No matter what anyone may have said about the man, no matter what he himself said about him, Naruto missed him more than he'd ever find himself able to voice aloud. He remembered his first birthday with him. He got him a set of clothes. Sure, they were hideous orange and, sure, it was a crime to wear these as a ninja and even more so as a marked man as he was, but it felt so nice to just have them. A gift, the first he hadn't received from the third. Sakura gifted him a book. He was surprised when she wasn't sarcastic about it, nor did she tease him in any way about the fact that he didn't seem to know what to do with it. The book was about basic medical techniques and was written by Tsunade. It was, if he thought about it, damn useful to have. He was not surprised by the training weights he got from Lee, he didn't expect anything less. Nor did the speech he got from Guy that came with a green jumpsuit. Never would he wear it, but he couldn't just not accept it. Naruto teared up when Tuchi and Ayame declared that they would write up a contract with the Uzumaki clan and in exchange for protection, the clan would eat for free at the noodle bar. He had no idea what Hinata said, stuttered when she handed him the recipe for her ointment, but he thanked her nonetheless. Shino, as weird as it was, gifted him an ant farm. He was told that they were special, trained to defend a perimeter he could set up for them, working like an invisible alarm for intruders. That could actually be useful at some point. Besides, these things looked awesome. Can you imagine bluish ants that seemed to carry swords and armor? Cool, I tell you. And don't you dare argue. Neji's gift was interesting. Naruto's eyebrow twitched when the Hyuga handed him a book on etiquette. But then again, it could be incredibly useful as clan head. From Choji, he got something he didn't expect. Property. A lot of property. Choji, Naruto said as he stared at the deed. I can't just. That's too much. The Akamichi shook his head. Naruto, without you, there wouldn't be any of us left alive. This property, it's just a little old shop that had been in the outskirts and wasn't damaged by the attack. In fact, it is right next to the Uzumaki compound. So please, in the name of my clan, take it and put it to good use. Happy birthday, Naruto. Stunned didn't even compare to how Naruto felt then, but he managed to thank Choji nonetheless. Things seemed to slow down then and Naruto found himself sitting under a tree, watching as his friends stood at the tables Choji had borrowed from one of his clan's many restaurants, most of which had already been rebuilt. Kiba and Lee were competing in something Naruto couldn't discern, but it involved push-ups and a barrel full of sake. Already Naruto was praying the Lee didn't come into contact with the alcohol. Gaara sitting down at his side startled Naruto out of his musings. 18 years, huh? The Cage mused. More emotion audible than Naruto remembered ever being evident in the redhead's voice. Time passes fast. I'm already feeling old. He grinned. I guess that makes Granny ancient then. How are you doing? Very good actually, Gaara responded. I just signed of some emergency supplies for Konoha before coming here. You have an unreasonable demand for minerals these days. Naruto snorted. I wonder why that might be. Didn't you yourself blow up a big part of the village? I hear the biggest crater was made by you and the Kyuubi. Ah, let's not talk about that. Gaara smiled. As you wish. He looked over to where Shikamaru was trying to ward off Temari by bringing Lee between them, who was still doing push-ups. Without hands. Damn, I hear you have married. Naruto nodded. Yep, that happened. And when would you introduce my sister-in-law to me? A smile hushed over Naruto's face as he tried to keep his features under control. It was nice to know that Gaara considered him his brother. Tayuya, my dearest wife, is right over there, Naruto said and pointed at one of the tables. Gaara's gaze drifted over to it. Present at said table was a redhead that could only have been Tayuya, laughing together with another girl with shorter red hair at Ino, whose hair were tied to Choji's belt at the boy's back. In an effort to untie his teammate, Choji turned to reach for the point her hair were knotted to his belt and dragged Ino along in the process of steadily turning around himself. Tayuya was laughing so hard, she had to hold on to Karen for support. Gaara merely raised an amused eyebrow at them and turned back to Naruto, who smiled fondly at her. She never had a chance to have fun before, he said suddenly, his eyes still fixed on her, watching her long hair sway and bounce as Karen, also laughing like a maniac, tried to pry Yuya off her person. I'm just glad she can now. Gaara tilted his head. You love her, don't you? Naruto flinched, as if he had forgotten about Gaara's presence. I've known her for a month and a half, you know. He gazed over at Yuya once more. And, fuck, you may be right. Kakashi, leaning against the tree Naruto and Gaara sat at, smiled at his student. Your father would be proud. That and you swear like your mother. Naruto jumped. Geez, Kakashi. You're late, by the way. The man shrugged and pulled his book from one of his pouches. One can't be late for a surprise party. And yet you were the last to arrive, Naruto countered. Another shrug from Kakashi was all he got. Lazy ass, Naruto huffed. You rang? Naruto looked up to see Shikamaru standing before him with a shogi board. Care for a game? I wondered if you've gotten too lazy for that, Naruto joked. Huffing, Shikamaru set the board down. It will take some time for that to happen. Doubt it, Naruto countered, moving a piece and beginning the game. I put my money on Tamari. Once you admit it, you'll be too busy for shogi. Gaara raised an eyebrow. You do realize that you're talking about my sister, right? Shikamaru's nose twitched as he made his move. Yes, Lord Cage, I'm aware, Naruto said in mock affront. Doesn't change that she has the hots for Shikamaru here. Since when did you become an expert in that? Shikamaru asked, annoyance and fear for his integrity written all over his face. Naruto moved his piece and smirked. I'm married. Check, by the way. Shikamaru frowned down at the board. Or so I've been told. I remember her, you know. I assume you know who she is? Who she was, Shikamaru. Now, she is my wife, Naruto corrected, frowning as all his moves seemed to suddenly backfire on him. I understand that this went down to return the Uzumaki clan to the village. But that's not all, or is it? Naruto shook his head. No, he said with a small smile. She's special. To me, that is. Shikamaru nodded slowly. Is it? Because of the red hair? Why is everyone saying that? Naruto exclaimed. Kakashi tapped Naruto's head with his book. Because, little genin, it's true. Now hold on a second. Naruto protested. Quiet, runt. The man is right, the fox rumbled in his head. Naruto could feel the giant beast nod sagely in his cage. Gaara also nodded. That does seem to be a likely assumption. Naruto moaned. Would you stop that? It isn't just the red hair. So you do admit that the hair has something to do with it, Shikamaru concluded as he decimated Naruto's pieces. Lay off, it's my birthday. Naruto whined. He saw Yuya watching him and forgot for a second what he even wanted to say, so he decided to not say it in the first place. Hey, Yuya, he called out to her. She seemed a little surprised, as well as a little annoyed, that he addressed her but walked over to him anyways. What's up, lover boy? There was an underlying anger in her voice, something Naruto couldn't comprehend at that moment. He'd understand if she would have been annoyed, but angry? He tried to think of something he did that would make her angry. Was it about this morning? No, she decked him for that already. So what was it? Coming up absolutely clueless, he decided simply ask her. But in a more private setting. He jumped up and took her hand. Come on, he said, smiling at her. She reddened but managed a reasonably convincing scowl. We'll be right back, he said to the others as he dragged her away from the party. As he had dragged her a sufficient amount of distance, he suddenly stopped. You're angry, he said. It was a statement, not a question. Yuya huffed. Hell yes I am. Naruto had yet to release her hand, but he didn't even notice it as he spoke. If it's about this morning, I already apologized. It's not like I could help it. Yuya blinked. What? No, it's not about that. She shook her head. You idiot, do you know what today is? My birthday? Naruto dared to ask. Exactly. Yuya huffed. And I didn't even know. Fuck, I don't even have a present or some shit. Naruto's confused expression softened into a smile. You don't have to get me anything, you know? It's not important, but it's important to me. Yuya retorted. You got me the flute. Her hand wandered to the thin pouch on her thigh. It was my first fucking birthday since I can remember, and when I get to celebrate the first goddamn birthday of someone else I want to do it fucking right. Especially since it's yours. She stomped her foot angrily but Naruto didn't step back. So you better let me gift you something. If that's what you want, Naruto said with a smile. I'd be happy to accept whatever you give me. At that moment all the anger melted of Tayuya and left behind a flustered mess. Fine. Then you better close your eyes, damn it.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.